Welcome to episode 64 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast with Nick and Blaze. For those that might be in more of the gaming sphere, that is the Minecraft number. Fun fact. Hello, I am Blaze, your host. And this week, we're still continuing on with the buy rounds. I completely forgot we actually have one more buy round to go through. So we will cover that at the end, as we normally do. But right now, we have our fourth buy round to cover. And boy, was it an interesting one. I don't even really know how I'm going to intro the rest of this, so I'm just going to jump right into it. How are you doing, Mr. Cyric?
Oh, yeah, a bit of a mixed bag for me. Still trying to find out what's a bit wrong with me. But I had a not too busy week. Because I pushed everything to next week, which is this week, which means that I'm probably going to be a bit busier. But for now, I am up and ready and keen to go into the podcast. Obviously, staying inside the weekend, I watched a fair amount of football, and some games made me happier than others. But we're getting on. So, yeah, but as I said, so, as much as it was a sort of a dour affair, like I'm looking forward to, I'm looking forward to getting through this week and, pushing on.
Yeah, no, I definitely haven't had as weird of a week as you have. Mine's just been work, watch Richmond lose, and then just more casual stuff, streaming, the usual kind of stuff.
Mm,
It's been a very quiet week for me, actually, otherwise.
yeah.
But we do have a bit of news to start with before we jump into the week that was, and that is the sad retirement of Jeremy McGovern.
Obviously happened late or mid last week. It was after the podcast anyway. I think even after the, we didn't even get a chance to announce it on the, what do you call them? Socials. But yes, Jerry McGovern, 11-year Eagle. Wow, depending if you count from when he got drafted or not. Yeah, as I said, retired. It was from concussions. Another player to go down to it. Obviously, you never want to see it, but we are thankful that he's prioritizing his long-term health.
Mm-hmm.
I always think it's great when players have the confidence to do that because obviously there is more to life than football.
Yes.
But as for his playing career, obviously started off as the Eagle, and yeah, it was a bit of a slow burn. He was drafted in the rookie draft in 2011, number 44. Couldn't make his way into the team until sorry, right. Did I say 2011 or 2014? 2014 is when he broke into the side.
Yes. That's right.
Playing as a forward, did okay there, kicked a few goals. But it wasn't until 2015 where he had to play defense due to the injuries of Eric McKenzie and Mitch Brown, where he found his role. He was a defender in 2015, 2016 to 2019. He is an All-Australian defender 4 years in a row, once again in 2024. So, again, not that long ago, he was considered the best player in the competition. One of the best rebounders in the competition. The best Eagles player, won the John Worsfold Medal in 2024.
Yes.
And, he was just, I think he's one of the rare defenders to be able to play such a good key one-on-one role while just taking intercept after intercept. He's not one that, you're going to have to play on like your second best forward because, that frees him up. He can do both. And I think, obviously it's sort of funny how the Eagles probably had two of the best defenders in their club history playing the same decade. Because obviously in 2012, Darren Glass retired. And then
it was early 2010s. You are right. I think it was 2012, 2013, that sort of era.
So obviously to be able to pick up the mantle, obviously if you also know his brother Mitch McGovern, he's a dual club player for Adelaide and Carlton.
Yes.
He also just plays both as a forward and a defender, depending on the whims of the club. And yeah, as I said, he was sort of, he wasn't technically undersized. He was 197, but I feel like I feel like he was always more smarter than he was naturally athletic. And as I said, he just had a keen game sense as defender.
He did.
It is like amazing that he wasn't actually, going into the side originally as a defender. So yeah,
Yeah, I remember like Richmond facing West Coast quite a few times over the years. A lot of the games being over there in the West, of course. I think we were one of the few teams that they actually played one of their last games at Subi, before they moved to Optus, which was just a interesting little tidbit of history there. But I remember seeing them play at the MCG at one point, and this was when the Eagles were good. So it's like the 2017 to like 2019 sort of era, and like that game, just watching Rewalt and McGovern go at it was phenomenal. It's one of the best matchups I think I've ever seen. Just a pure forward against a pure defender.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, like granted this isn't technically McGovern accurate, but like Alex Rance going up against who was the key forward at the time? Might have been Darling.
Kennedy.
Oh yeah, Kennedy. Kennedy was the bigger one. That's right. Yeah, it was just watching pure defenders just do their craft against incredible forwards is always such a joy to see. And McGovern was always one of the best when he made that switch to defense.
And I was gonna say, 2018. I think that was the year you're referring to. Break the record for most intercept marks in a season by taking 77, which previously held by Easton Wood apparently with 76 in the 2015 Dogs run. So as I said, obviously the game has shifted towards more intercept marks, and I wouldn't be surprised if that record got broken again. But in terms of just individually, not needing as much system around him to generate that sort of thing, because as we said, he was doing it when he was needing to be, the linchpin of the Eagles' defense last year. So, but as we all know, after 2019, he was actually a very reliable player. He only dropped a few games between 2015 when he started playing regularly in defense to 2019. But after 2020, that's where he started playing half seasons. 2024 again was the only season that he played fairly regular games. And unfortunately this season he could only manage 6. Still making good numbers in those 6, but as I said, just not to be, unfortunately.
Yeah, concussion, medical retirement is always extremely harsh way to go. But as he says in the retirement article, like sometimes that's just the way the game goes. Basher Hooley had to do the same thing because of his leg injuries. So we've had plenty of players in the past couple of years who've had to retire due to medical concussions and things like that. It sucks because you lose such incredible talent. But on the flip side, McGovern has had one hell of a career.
Yeah, and as I said, it is just a shame that he finishes on 197, which is funnily enough his height and his weight as on Footy Wire. So maybe there's something in that. I'm not too sure, but as I said, it was just not to be. But in terms of that, he's honestly crazy, like how good his 2024 season, obviously being injured so much, breaks his most disposals for a season, averages 8 intercepts per game, which is, as I mentioned to that 2018 season, is only 0.6 off his record-breaking season. And still averaging 2.8 goals score involvement, per game in a pretty dreck Eagles side.
Yeah, so, like him, Barras, I think Kelly had a couple of good games in there. Like there were very obviously this was a year that Waterman had a big standout.
Yeah.
With Oscar Allen being obviously out so often in 2024. Yeah. So like they still had some incredible, like veteran talent, or quote unquote veteran talent, because Waterman's like, halfway there. But they had some incredible pillars at both ends of the ground. It's just the Eagles just couldn't get anyone healthy on the park in the midfield to be able to
Yeah.
be a contending team. But
As I said, it's a bit of a stark contract to this year where they just can't get any veterans, anything out of their veterans. So
yeah, it's a
as I
weird
said,
weird flip.
sorely missed. Um, but as I said, the new Eagles come through. We won't talk about that this week. Obviously, they have the bye.
Yes.
But unless there's anything you want to add, shall we say farewell to Jeremy McGovern?
I'm just gonna
make his post-career have something.
I'm just gonna quickly cover his career achievements because they're listed right here in front of me.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So he was recruited from Claremont/North Albany via pick 44. Sorry, to Claremont via North Albany. With pick 44 in the 2010 rookie draft. Debuted in round 6.
Can I have something to add for that?
Go on.
This is a bit of sliding doors moment. Technically, the Dockers could have recruited him through father-son because his dad played, albeit a short time, for Fremantle, but at that time, the games requirement was very low for Fremantle to get a father-son. So
interesting.
Sliding doors there.
Yeah, he could have been a Fremantle player, and who knows, maybe it could have been the key pillar for them to win a premiership. It could have been an entire flip.
It would have been a forward, but you know what I mean? It's like when
they might have still had to shift into the defense. You never know.
Oh, you never know. But 2014, you know what I mean? It's it would have been when he's gone the park is when Freo made that flag tilt. So,
and it's also when like Pav was their number one key forward, when he was like the dominant one.
Yeah.
So it could have been an entire flip story.
Could have been a dual attack. Yeah, exactly. So who knows?
Who knows? But yes, his debut was in round 6, 2014 against Carlton, the team that his brother now plays for. Made the All-Australian squad of 40, in 2015. Then made All-Australian top 22 in 16, 17, 18, 19, and 2024. Most intercept marks in an AFL season was 77, as we had mentioned previously. West Coast Eagles life member in 2022 for at least playing 150 games plus the grand final in 2018. The John Worsfold medalist in 2024 and was a runner-up in 2017. Has played 197 career games and kicked 38 career goals. So with that,
yes, we
salute you, Jeremy McGovern. Thank you for giving your life to this beautiful game, and we hope you have a very comfortable retirement.
Yeah, I was going to say, giving your life sounds a bit ominous. He is, in fact, still alive, thankfully. And we hope to hear much more, depending on what role he goes into.
Yeah, I didn't mean that as like a life or death kind of situation.
Yeah, I know. I just seemed
footy takes a toll. Footy definitely takes a toll.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. You got to look after yourself.
Speaking of the West, though, that's where we're heading for our first game this week. Thursday night clash. I don't know if it could be considered like a big blockbuster clash. But Fremantle hosted the Bombers.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the result was what was expected, but considering this was like a blockbuster game involving Freo and Essendon, well, one team doesn't like playing too much under the bright lights, and the other team is just Essendon. Scraping together a backline to play Freo in the mildly wet Thursday night.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, this is where I have to shout out the ground staff, because to recover that pitch after Origin, played the night before, in a very heated, scrappy contest, they did mint. So, yeah, as I said, because, yeah, that was a pretty... I mean, obviously being packed out didn't matter, but...
yeah.
You know what I mean? It was a pretty big affair, and it was really good for Perth just to be able to host the Origin and put a suitable game of football the next day.
Genuinely,
but we're not here to talk about crowds.
Genuinely, yeah, I think Optus is like one of those stadiums that's just perfect for multiple sports usage. Like it's a great stadium shape. It's a good size.
Yeah.
It
was maintenance though. Last year it did fall apart.
Oh yeah,
and we had obviously a lot of injuries. Especially probably for the last 3 years, Freo and West Coast have complained about the grounds being too hard. But if they get that right, yeah,
Which
so
it
one of the most beautiful
seems
ovals
like
to
they
play on.
have.
Hopefully, yeah. It's been good this year.
Anyway, go on.
Yes. But Freo, basically to sum up this game, had 2 periods of dominance thanks to the matchups, equaling to about maybe 1.5 quarters of play. But I will say for the rest of it, I think Essendon were at least combating Freo's entries as well as they could in defence. They were forcing them to only kick goals from 30 metres out, i.e. that there was no goals kicked closer to. So that's a big tick for them considering how bad their backline was damaged. The big problem for Essendon is, however, while they did manage to set up an efficient forward half game, scoring 6-1 from that half, the dominance in forward 50 entries towards Freo was 57-34, and the dominance out of stoppage was 44-26, which means they just didn't have enough first hands to the ball. They're a high hand bowling team, that's okay, and their back half movement was like okay enough, but from the centre square, they were just a peck behind Freo, who, while not like strictly ruthlessly dominant, had control the entire night, ended up being 41-point victors, 16-8, 104 to 9-9, 63. Book it in, Blazy. I'm not forgetting the scores this week.
Yay!
And yeah, as I said, it's all about the minor wins. All about the minor wins. And I think there was enough for Essendon. I think, although 41 points is a bit disappointing, it was a marked improvement from last week. And I think there were some effort points where you're like, you know what? Even in the areas where the Dogs should be struggling a bit more, I can at least see what they're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I completely like they definitely had a game plan going in, and I think when they were able to get it like on their terms, they were able to perform. Like, I mean, they still got a reasonable score considering where they're at. Like they didn't get completely dominated by Freo, and granted, Freo aren't really a team to be able to completely dominate teams for the most part.
Yeah, I think this might have been their biggest margin for the year. I don't think they've really had too many big wins.
I think the game against Richmond was probably the other closest one. Oh, the other like kind of bigger margin one. Yeah. But like for the most part, like they contended fairly well to what Freo really threw at them. So to their credit, like we can see that there is some kind of plan formulating even with all of their injuries. I assume once their injuries are back, it'll be a little bit more, a little bit more of an organized plan, hopefully. Like, because that's what we've really wanted to see. That's what we mentioned last week. So we just want to see them try and work it on their forward craft, forward pressure, better inside 50 usage, stuff like that. And I think for the most part, we did see that. To Freo's credit, though, they looked really solid. Actually, I think there were definitely moments, but that's normally expected with Freo. But I think for the most part, they look like somewhat reasonable contenders.
Tempering that, like, maybe it's because I watch Freo every week. I still don't think some of that forward half connection is all that great. Obviously this week, Josh Tracy was a lot more prominent than he has in other weeks, which does patch up a lot of things. When he is going well, their forward line generally is, but at the same time, they were, I don't want to say propped up about it, but for how dominant they were in territory in it, it was only late where they really blew it out, and that was when, Essendon were really, really shot. So
yeah, it's when they started running out of legs.
It's like, I mean, it's good enough, but you know what I mean? It's like, there's a few things like that were just interesting to see how much they didn't quite dominate compared to maybe a Geelong last week. And I just want to, highlight a small quirk. And this is partially just like what I think of like one-on-one contests as a stat. But, it's like we're saying all this about the Dons' defense, but the Dons had 13 one-on-ones and lost 2, which equals 15%, while Freo had, they lost 5 out of 12. I think that's meant to be had 12 and lost 5. I wrote it backwards.
Yes, you did.
For 42% loss. So, I don't think like one-on-one contests are like the be-all, end-all of defensive stats. I think it's a very specious stat. But you know what I mean? It's like, it's funny because, you go all around, it's the, they should just get like mark after mark. Like Essendon did good bringing the ball to ground in their back line.
Yeah.
And they forced it up. And look, the Dockers were still able to capitalize from that. Like 13 general play Scots for 9 goals for.
Mm-hmm.
And a chunk of those were from stoppage contests as well. So, like they're not always, but you know what I mean? It was like they were forcing him to take the slightly harder bit. And sure, they couldn't really defend that. But, at least they're starting somewhere in defense. Obviously, they still had a few matchups. Laverde got pretty much absolutely smacked up by Tracy.
Yeah.
And they had a few other matchups that, were just a bit vague. But, as I said, it started somewhere. That was good. Talking about, though, in terms of stoppage contest, how important it is for Freo to get their game going.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how dominant they can be. Because, it was Vigo Vicentini's first game up against Luke Jackson. And you know what? The advantage, it was apparent. Like, Jackson had the best champion data ranking for any Freo player.
Mm-hmm,
and like the second highest ranking for Ruckman ever. Behind, or maybe tied to Max Gawn. Again, disclaimer, champion data doesn't mean everything, but it was really good. Like, he had a very solid game. But, it was also, the other small things. It was tagging Warner, tagging Merritt with Warner. I thought that was very effective. Because, it was not just limiting the amount of possessions of a good player, but when you look at the comparison to getting the ball on the outside,
mm-hmm.
Freo were just so better at generating the play from an inside to an outside contest. I'm not saying like getting the ball onto the wing. I'm saying, getting it to the first player that's actually able to freely dispose of the ball.
Yeah.
Whereas you took off Merritt, and it just made it harder because Essendon, they try their hardest, but they just get sucked into the contest more. And that's when it starts to rock, because that's when, as I said, it just becomes a scale of, a player gets sucked in, that makes another player free, and because that player free, someone else goes towards him, and then you start getting chains.
Yes.
And it's easier to move the ball up on the outside. So, when Essendon did win, though, as I said, it was so hard for them to find that first kick, as I really think Jai Caldwell was really the only player for that night to be able to generate meterage. So, for Essendon, well, I do think, tick for the forward half game, tick for the defenders, that bit in the midfield where they've still got their senior players, they will be wanting to look at the X and O's after that game. Because that's something that's, improvable. They've had games where they've dropped a bit of clearance. In fact, last year, Essendon actually won on clearance over Fremantle. So, it's funny, it was good on Fremantle fixing that problem up from one game to the other. I know it's a year apart, but you know what I mean? It's because as I said, I think the rest for Essendon, is all very workable. They'll get players back. They just got to make sure that, again, they just don't get suckered in those midfield contests, especially when your best player for distribution is getting tagged like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's only so much that they could really do. And as we've talked about this in the past, is that when Merritt struggles, the whole midfield seems to struggle, despite the fact that they have I wouldn't say so much talent, but they have really good players in that midfield. They can step up and should be able to step up when Merritt's struggling. Whether they help him shrug off the tackle, whether they... tag us, whether they, apply, maybe kind of swap roles, maybe they take sort of Merritt's inside role, something like that. But when,
I think,
it's got to be a captain's kind of decision.
I think the difference between Essendon of 2 years ago though and Essendon now is you've still got players winning the ball. They're still making the contest, and it's sure, the execution might be a bit off, but we've seen games where it was literally just Zach Merritt and nothing.
Yeah, we have.
But you know what? It's Darcy Parish, he comes in there, plays a pretty okay game. Like, usage and, threat, maybe a bit lower, but at least it's getting in there. Jai Caldwell, probably just a good game. As I said, probably someone like a Setterfield. He got a bit of a knock, struggled a bit. But you know what I mean? Still put a bit of pressure at times. You know what I mean? It's just some of those small things. But yeah, as I said, I think for Essendon, it's just the depth that comes off because, as I said, once you get past, this core group, you're going into players like, what's his name? I played a bit in the centre before. What's his name? I can't remember.
Younger player, older player?
Yeah, as a younger player, about 3 years. Played a bit of inside mid. It's on the fringes. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
anyway,
I can't help you with that one.
In terms of like their centre bounce rotations, you know what I mean? It's starting to get a bit thin there. So, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a targetable thing. Essendon's just got to work on keeping their shape. And you've got to be brave too, because like Essendon, big club in the media. Like, when I talk about getting sucked in, like, if they have a bad performance and they're like trying to keep outside shape, like the media just pass on. They're like, oh, they're not tackling hard enough. Oh, there's no pressure. Oh, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes the most disciplined thing is to actually let a bit of space happen. Like, not always just go tackle. Because then fast hands like Freo can beat you and work the ball to the outside and get what they want.
Yes, which is exactly what they did. Speaking of Freo, though, that is where I'll start with my individuals. And as we had mentioned just before, Luke Jackson had an incredible game, completely dominant around the ground. He finished with 48 hitouts, with 18 of them to advantage, and kicked 3 goals from 21 disposals, 18 of them effective, equating to 85.7% efficiency, 14 contested possessions, 10 clearances, 12 score involvements, and 17 pressure acts. Luke Ryan was very important coming from half back. He finished with 32 touches, 30 of them effective, equating to 93.8% efficiency, 10 intercepts, 12 marks, 6 score involvements, 5 1%ers, 4 spoils, and 487 metres gained. And then Caleb Sarong was immense with ball movement, kicking 2 goals from 35 disposals, 29 of them effective, equating to 82.9% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 10 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 6 score involvements, 4 tackles, 18 pressure acts, and 783 metres gained. As for the Bombers, as you had mentioned, Jai Caldwell was pretty massive for trying to keep them in it for as long as he could. He was, again, pretty much doing everything while Zach Merritt was getting tagged. He finished with 32 touches, 25 of them effective, equating to 78.1% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 8 clearances up behind, 4 score involvements, 5 tackles, 25 pressure acts, and 482 metres gained. Then debutant Vigo Vicentini, brother of Dante Vicentini, over at the Power. He was very solid on his debut, getting 17 hitouts with 3 of them to advantage, and 15 disposals, 8 contested possessions, 5 intercepts, 3 marks, with all of them being intercept marks, 4 clearances, 25 pressure acts, 5 1%ers, and 4 spoils. Over on the injury front, Xavier Dersma went off with a hamstring concern and was subbed out. And on the MRO front, Zach Merritt was fined $1,000 for, you guessed it, contact with an umpire. Just before we continue on, I want to just quickly jump back to Vicentini. Do you think he'll get Rising Star this week for that performance? Granted, it was up against Luke Jackson, but there wasn't really many players that kind of stood out this week.
Man, honestly, I reckon I reckon Archer May could be, because I don't think he won it the week before, did he?
He didn't. It was Tyrell Dewar from the Eagles.
Yeah, Dewar. Yeah, I think Archer May. I actually thought he was very good as a lead-up target, presented very well, kicked 2 goals. But I think it's like an underrated performance where if you miss the match, you just like look at it and it's like, oh yeah, whatever. But when you look at like his efforts, and it's not just the effort of the rock, because he got beaten like fairly comprehensively. And, around the ground, still beaten, you'd expect it. He's not a defender. And Luke Jackson is probably the best forward of a ruck forward combo you could get. So you just got to forget about that. And it was Vicentini. He was putting pressure when the ball went to ground, which I thought was very good.
Mm-hmm.
And he was following up, getting disposals. And sometimes he was even the link-up chain. You know what I mean? Like, in the first quarter when Essendon couldn't really figure out their link-up, Vicentini still acted as an option. And it wasn't great. It was probably preferred to have the ball in someone else's hand. The fact that he was still being like, yeah, first gamer, I'm probably not the person you should be, but I'm going to be available in case I needed to.
Yeah.
Big ticks.
Yeah,
We love that.
completely agree. Also, as I said it, the Rising Star did update, and it wasn't Vigo, sadly. So we will get to the Rising Star when the actual game for it comes around. However, we have another game to go through first, the Friday Night Clash, an actual blockbuster this time, down at the Cattery between Geelong and the Brisbane Lions for Patrick Dangerfield's 350th.
Yeah, honestly, we thought we might get a bit of cinema in this game. Obviously, they bust out the shirts for this game, covered the seats in it. For some reason, it was apparently controversial. I didn't really care. You know what I mean? It's like you go to the game, you get a free shirt for them. I think the fans would appreciate that. Yeah, sure. I mean, good on them. But yeah, unfortunately, it was pretty much a breakdown in attack for one team and a return to form for the other. It's like trading places, and Logan Morris was Eddie Murphy for the day, kicking 5-1 from set shot as Brisbane kicked 11-4 from set shots overall, which is absolutely miles different from what I've seen for the last few weeks. Whilst the car sleeping Geelong kicked a mirrored 4-11. But Blaze, who probably doesn't know, Trading Places was an Eddie Murphy movie from the 80s and 90s.
I know what era it's from. I haven't seen it, but I'm aware of it. Don't you worry.
Oh, yeah. It's like, I haven't actually seen it either. I just know it exists. And it's like, yeah. Someone said it was like Trading Places. And then I just like instantly couldn't get that movie poster out of my head.
Sorry, before we continue, you did mention Logan Morris. I just want to mention that he's the youngest player to kick 5 goals back to back since Matthew Lloyd in 97.
Exactly. Huge.
Really interesting.
And Lloydo, I don't think it was a high draft pick, but I think Morris would have been like much further down than him. I want to say Matthew Lloyd was like a high second.
I can't remember. I know I've done research on it like way back, but I haven't looked at it recently.
Okay. Oh no, he was preseason. Okay, he was like a draft steal. That's right.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I was like, I know Hurd was. I didn't think Lloyd was, but there you go. So okay, yeah, Lloyd probably. He doesn't win on that regard, but it's still pretty damn impressive. Anyway, from like a pick 44.
You may continue.
Yeah. So I will say it wasn't just goal kicking that set these two teams apart, which, still very big. It was 6-15, 51 for the Cats, 4-8, 92 for Brisbane. So quite apparent that was a big thing. But I think it was Brisbane back to ruthlessly hunting the turnovers. And they sort of did a Geelong on them because Geelong, they were trying to do the central switch kicks, open up dangerous areas of the ground, and then Brisbane were like, yoink. Give me those easy shots from turnovers. They scored 10-6 from turnovers. And while it wasn't quite a half-forward press, they were making sure that transition for Geelong was quite as annoying as possible. As their entries, as I said, it wasn't just the turnovers. It did cause their entries to be a bit more rushed. I think in the first quarter, I think it was like dictated by Dry Myers. I think he had like 2 scrubber kicks just from pressure. And, one of the best link-up players in the forward half looked like an absolute clown. So, obviously it was just, a couple of bad errors. But you know what I mean? It was just setting the tone. Field kicking and disposal was a bit poor from both teams at times. Geelong's poor accuracy just didn't allow that punishment. And Brisbane just got a lot of deeper entries, meaning a lot of their intercepts, for Geelong, started at fullback anyway. But overall, as I mentioned, you know what I mean? It was just like Brisbane, I think we're finding a lot of pace from the outside. And, as I said, Geelong, we're going from the outside, inside to outside.
Yeah.
Where I think like Brisbane had a lot of success just from staying on the outside. Because Geelong, they like to defend the corridor.
Mm-hmm.
They like to keep it tight there. And Brisbane were like, yeah, if you want to do that, that's fine, but we're going to work it out. We're just going to stick to our lines. I must admit, I did watch an excellent video by Jeff White. I've found his YouTube video, and he has some excellent breakdowns of stuff like transition plays, and he even did a ruck breakdown of Vigo Vicentini. So check that out. I think it's called First Use Footy, I think.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
we can probably drop a link
and also
down in the description for this video.
For those who don't know, Jeff White was also a ruckman for Melbourne back in the day. Fairly quality player, but yeah, as I said, it was just like, it was something you could tell while watching it, but when you see him break it down, you know what I mean? It was just, it was beautiful to watch. As I said, though, just on a pure basic level, ball movement for Brisbane was much better than Geelong. Like, it wasn't just the accuracy.
Yeah, it was extremely clean. And I just want to briefly mention Darcy Ford specifically. Like, I think his ruck work the past couple of weeks, even though, granted, the ruck talent that he's been up against isn't, the greatest of ruck talents, the fact that he's gotten a lot more consistent play recently has done wonders for him. Like, as much as I think Brisbane definitely need the big O back for a lot of the more top end ruck talent. Sport's keeping his own. He's doing really well around the ground as well as just in ruck contests.
Yeah,
and it's really, really good to see him actually provide more of like a premiership performance, like outside of the premiership era.
I'll say, like, I know this is what you meant. It's like, I don't think Brisbane need Big O because they have Ford, but they're obviously going to go Big O.
Yes.
It's just, for the effort that you're getting for your second ruckman, it's absolutely fantastic.
It's more than I think they were expecting from him, and it's doing wonders for their midfield just in general.
Yeah, absolutely. It's allowing them to fire still, which allows them to set up their game, which is obviously still a fairly central contest for a team like Brisbane.
Yeah, and on the Geelong front, it's not looking pretty.
No, I mean, look, this is an aberration, really. Because I put it down because I saw it was quite ironic because there was a graphic showing team accuracy. Geelong were touted for their high accuracy. That graphic, which was released last round, showed them 1.8%. Having a 1.8% accuracy lead over the second best Bulldogs.
Yep.
That has now dropped to third after this game. However, as I said, it should be noted that Brisbane sort of shutting down. I put the outside game. It was more transition game. Sort of affected the ease of their shot. Although they did miss some easy ones, their expected X score per shot was 3.3 this game. Which, in perspective, if this was for a season, that would be lower than Richmond, who are obviously 18th. And 2.75 was the general play X shot score.
Yes.
Which would be just around Sydney's average general shot play, which is about second last. Or third last, maybe. So, you know what I mean? It's like, if you're disciplined, if you put some effort into shutting that link up, you can just make it a bit harder. Obviously, for this, the link-up piece that obviously got a bit broken was Graham Myers. He got played out of the game. A bit scrappy when he's got it. But you know what I mean? It's like, if you just do little things, you can flip the script on what's normally a well-oiled unit. And that's what Brisbane took advantage. Like, as much as it was an off game by Geelong, Brisbane, by design, were doing things to actively try and set this up.
They were. They wasn't necessarily Brisbane playing to their usual game style. It was them adapting to Geelong's game style and shutting them down.
Yeah,
exactly. Which is what makes the difference in a coaching plan, really. Like, your plan A is primarily like your typical game plan that they let a team would normally have. It's a way that they want to play. Your plan B is your adaptation to your opposing team's game plan. And Brisbane basically did both and did it well.
That's what I'm saying. It's like they don't have to be entirely separate because, as I said, it's like, okay, yeah, sure, Brisbane have to use the outside a bit more, but
they have the players
that can still be an
that.
Intercept-heavy game. You know what? And I said, it's like they intercepted from the middle. And that's when, as I said, you had high intercept from the middle. Players like Dane Zorko are
Mhm.
getting a lot. As I said, a bit more on the wing. Players like Jared Berry got a few. Levi Ashcroft did a solid job getting a few. So, as I said, it's not just, as I said, from like the half-back line, it's up the ground a bit. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. Both were on the topic of Brisbane. I may as well start with our individuals, starting with Logan Morris, as we had already talked about. He was an absolute weapon up forward once again, kicking 5-1 from 13 disposals, 4 contested possessions, 8 marks with 6 of them inside 50, 8 score involvements, 4 tackles, 3 1%ers, and 3 spoils. Josh Dunkley added immense pressure into that midfield, finishing with 30 touches, 14 contested possessions, 4 clearances, 8 score involvements, 10 tackles, and 28 pressure acts. And then Jasper Fletcher was very solid with transition this week, collecting 23 disposals, 20 of them effective, equating to 87% efficiency, 7 intercepts, 6 inside 50s, 3 score involvements, 12 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, and 3 spoils. Over on the Geelong front, I thought Tom Atkins was still providing solid pressure for his role. He finished with 21 touches, 15 contested possessions, 5 intercepts, 4 inside 50s, 8 clearances, 1 behind, 6 score involvements, 6 tackles, 22 pressure acts, and 13 ground ball gets. And then Tom Stewart, who I thought has kind of had it's kind of a middling year. He's kind of been in and out with injury. Hasn't really performed to the best of as he normally does, but he was very solid this week. Otherwise, he collected 22 disposals, 17 of them effective, equating to 77.3% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 15 intercepts, 7 marks, with 5 of them being intercept marks, 3 score involvements, 4 1%ers, and 4 spoils. Quickly jumping over to the injury front, Darcy Gardner was a late change with an illness. So hopefully he should be back for the Lions very soon. And then for the MRO, Mark O'Connor was fined $1,000 for, you guessed it, contact with an umpire.
Yeah.
It's
So
not looking
yeah,
good.
as I said, no, indeed. And okay, so I know this might be like a bit weird because I've just like remembered it. A few weeks ago, we had like a little joke of like the almost rising star of like players that are like just ineligible, like, 21, 22, 23 that feel like they should be,
Yeah,
but obviously can't get voted on. Jasper Fletcher, it's like what, his third year
I
now?
think this is his third year.
Is, yeah, 21 years old. He would got to be in the running for the MS Rising Star. Like
Absolutely.
his pickup this year has been phenomenal.
He's had a phenomenal season so far. It's severely underrated,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know what? I'm not sure if we're going to get an award out. I'm not sure if we're going to get his address. If Fags, if you're listening, please trust us. We will not send Anthrax. We'll send him a trophy if he continues. Because, yeah, as I said, he's turning into one of my favorite players to get excited about. Like, he's the one that, the footy connoisseurs come to appreciate, You watch him week in, week out, and you're like, man, he's really lifting.
Yeah, I agree. Like, this is like, granted, when he was brought into like the whole premiership structure of 24, like he kind of fit in fairly seamlessly. But now that he's continuing that form into this season, he's looked so good. And like, I know there is a very likely chance he won't get like All Australian or not even in the squad of 40,
Oh, yeah.
but like he deserves it with how well he's playing, I'll be honest.
Yeah, again, if it's like, if you put like a time restriction of like the wing position and you're like, okay, you actually have to spend like more than 50% of your time on a wing or like 50% of your possessions.
Yeah.
That's when like a Jasper Fletcher might be put into it. Also, Zach Bailey on the other side.
Yeah, true.
He's
Bailey's
probably
had
a
a
bit more
fairly
of a pure winger.
he's had a fairly
And
solid
yeah,
season as well so far.
yeah, so yeah. So yeah, wingers. They gotta get appreciated more. We always love talking about wingers.
Absolutely. Everyone knows that I'm a big fan of D'Ambrosio at Hawthorn and Hugo Ralsmith at Richmond, of course. So we love our wingmen. Underrated
not
role.
a huge year for wingers, but as I said, I think we talk about a lot. Like a lot of halfbackers and a lot of half forwards. Like a lot of their net role now is to play the wing position.
Yeah, it is.
And then that it sort of makes it you only get one pure wing now. But the ones that do it, the ones that run the hard yard, will always go out the way to appreciate.
We're just the fans of players that can run a lot, great with intercepts, and know how to kick a ball really well.
Yeah. Exactly. Talking about teams that don't know how to kick a ball very well, shall we talk about Carlton?
Yes, we are now jumping over to our our Good Friday rematch, where North
Mm.
Melbourne previously got absolutely spanked by Carlton. This week it was a little bit of the opposite. Over at the
Yeah.
MCG this time, with Carlton hosting the Roos.
And we're talking about flips gripping on us. Carlton also did the same because they were like, their fans won't be happy still. It was a wasteful Blues outfit that surprisingly couldn't convert early when they like to in a fairly scrappy and low skill quarter. And then North would turn it up. They kicked 12 goals to 3 in the next two quarters, showcasing some midfield dominance as they killed it from the stoppages, which, as I said, scoring from stoppage dominance isn't always North's plus side. So credit to them getting it right this week. The defense was solid, but in jump time, the Blues did manage to get this game too close for North's comfort levels. Back in the game with a 5-goal stand, 3 in the last 5 minutes, which gave the Roos the weird quirk of winning a game with a scoreless last quarter. The last time that happening being 1958. Thank you, useless AFL statistics, for that nugget.
I love useless AFL
Weird
stats.
game.
They're one of my favorite
Oh
pages.
yeah, absolutely great. Useless and what's the other one? Swamp Things.
Yes.
Yeah,
Swampy over on
of
Twitter
course,
/X. Also a brilliant page to follow.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, I personally steal half my content from Emil and Bruce on Blue Sky /X, but I think actually only on Blue Sky. But in terms of just like your bite-sized nuggets, we love that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, as I said, so in terms of this guy there now, like, yeah, they had the scoreless last quarter, but for North, I think it's one of the rare games where each line gets a tick. I think, we'll start with the midfield. We've got Carlton's midfield. We've said, Carlton come and go in areas, but their midfield's still like the core unit. Honestly, thoroughly beaten in the middle. And it wasn't just, defensively, where we know Carlton are a bit Civ-like in transition. Like, it was offensively as well. And, there was a big step between the best midfielder, which was George Hewitt for Carlton, and the next best midfielder, which was honestly Mark Pittonet. He was just okay, did okay against Cherry. Smothered him in the first quarter, but other than that, just had a, Mark Pittonet is okay sort of game. Well, for the Roos, it was only really Wardlaw that had a bit of a stinker for the North crew, and that includes their outside midfielders too.
Yeah.
I think Dylan Stephens played relatively all right. I think Powell was the other one that sort of played on the outside. I think he may have rotated in and out. Parker played a bit more inside midfield and was absolutely fantastic. But it just seemed the balance was right. As I said, Colby McKercher, again, returning off halfback. I really appreciate his ball use there. So, again, they found a link up between Kobe McKercher, who's probably their best ball user, to outside midfielders that can continue the play, which was really good. Talking about, again, players out of nowhere, Toby Pink taking another scalp, took on, I announced him round 1 last year as a 1/6 of the worst defensive lineups of recent times. I think that was probably one of the first episodes of this podcast.
I mean, at the time,
and
you weren't wrong.
Yeah. Oh, no, at the time I wasn't wrong. But for him to go from there, and, he was pretty in that game. Taking some legitimate scalps. He's taken Curnow, kept him goalless, kept him quiet. Oscar Allen, obviously, I think he might have been a bit injury affected that game. And Jai Amos. I know Amos hasn't had the best year, but you know what I mean? It's 3 big bodies, 3 athletic bodies they've had to contend with. And, he's done it really good. And, as I said, the back line still polished out. And as I said, that link up, Tom Powell, as I said, that post clearance work, as I said, it was just a lot better from the Roos. They weren't just like dumping that first possession. They were getting it to a player. That player was sending it forward. And for the most part, they could convert relatively well up in the forward line. They were very accurate. Weren't always efficient, but they were very accurate when the ball went forward. So, yeah, that was enough to win it for them. Did I say the score in this game? It was 10-3-13, 73 Carlton to 13-6, 84. So I'm still counting that. I'm not dropping it from here, Blazy. I'm not fumbling the bag.
I'll be generous. I'll be
It's no
genuinely honest. I wasn't entirely sure if you had said this score or not, so I probably good that you said it anyway.
Yeah.
No, like this was a really, really solid defensive game from North. Just across the board, apart from their fourth quarter and being unable to score in that fourth quarter, they were really, really solid. They stitched 3 solid quarters together. They contended enough to win that fourth, to win out that fourth by winning the game. But the fact that we can see that they're on really, really good path right now. Like they're on the path they should be on, and that's slowly tracking upwards. You know, their players are all getting better, as we've said before, more experience into these players, more game time. Keep the cores together. They've had their injury list actually isn't too bad at the moment, so they're looking pretty good.
Yeah, it's really easily.
So, like for the most part, they've got almost all of their right pieces. George Wardlaw isn't really having a great season since coming back from injury, so that's not really helpful for them right now. But he'll hopefully
it's good
get
that they're playing well without him.
Yes.
So. Like we said at the start of the season, they're relying too much on Wardlaw to come in and add pressure.
Yeah, we're
and granted,
relying
I don't think
too much
this is
on
like an insane pressure
Wardlaw,
match,
on Sheasel, on like their younger superstars, and they've finally. And granted, you know, Sheasel, he's having a pretty solid season, considering where North is at. But like the fact that their other younger talents, like you know Tom Powell, Toby Pink, as we've already mentioned, like a lot of these younger stars, quote unquote, are finally stepping up, finally taking ownership and responsibility of what they can do for the team, and proving that North can be contenders. Well, maybe not contenders of like a premiership, but like contenders against somewhat decent teams, can fight for a middle of the pack
competitive
spot.
I think. Yeah exactly.
And
I think it's like one of the things. It's like we felt like they should be, but it was like we're just waiting for North to prove themselves, but they just couldn't win. And you know, like again, we saw signs of that being not able to defend that lead you know, in this game, but they still stuck through it. You know what I mean? And you got to give them credit because, you know, as I said, that's just something you learn from opportunities. Obviously, they're still prone off score of turnovers. Carlton scored 8-8, in fact, off turnovers, 56, which is like most of their score. Oh, well, they get 73, so yeah, a good chunk.
I wanna ask you a question.
Yeah.
Is Carlton's issues coaching or players?
Oh, man, I think it's sort of players, but it's in a way that is from coaching. Because I've actually had a bit of talk about. I'm not sure if I've led you into this by mentioning it, but maybe this is just, you know, sort of same thoughts. But we've had times with Carlton where they've got good players on each line, but the overlap between those players hasn't been that great. Like right now, you got Sam Doherty and what's his name, Adam Sard, in the same list, and yet disposal of halfback, mediocre. You know, you've got Chera, Hewitt, Cripps, in a midfield,
Walsh,
and you know, as I said, and it's even balanced. You know, as I said, like Adam Chera and George Hewitt have played defensive midfield roles, and yet with all three of them in there, 7-2, North Melbourne from stoppages. Only 1-2 from centre bounce, but it's still, you know what I mean? Like, the shape's still there. You know, and it's like, how do they, like, you know, with their talents, how do they not come together? Because we've seen this, even when they're dominant, you know what I mean? Like, they haven't quite reached that same ascendancy, except for when, you know, their 2000 and, 23 season, 24 season? 23. when Kerno and Mackay were just both dominating in like the one instance where both players have fired at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you can say it's good, but there's only one season where they both had good seasons. And arguably, it's because they've only ever kicked to them. And anytime they've tried anything different, anytime like one's not available, it's sort of all fallen apart. So, you know what I mean? Like, whether that's, like entirely Voss's fault, whether it's just like players always going like safe or, options, or whether it's just like they need a system drain. Like they need, maybe it's Voss, maybe it's also a few assistant coaches as well that need to change up because, yeah, as I said, they're just not meshing in talent. And I know that they've got a drop off between their best and worst players, but they're also losing in areas that they should win.
Yeah.
And that's concerning.
Especially when they have such top end talent in that midfield and such proven talent in that midfield. Where you're just struggling when they shouldn't be, and
yeah, exactly.
It doesn't make sense to any of us as to why. I mean, granted, maybe it's just the curse of Carlton. Like their cycle of misery has started, but they shouldn't be in this situation. Is the thing.
Yeah. I know, but it's like it still feels like a layoff of that. The Brendan Bolton. What's the other one? Teague era of just when things get tough, they can be like as defensively good as they can out back, but they would just let up goals. Like that's just Carlton through and through. Like even in a good defensive year, which this year they have,
like
they still don't actually feel that hard to score against.
Wiedering and Silvani have been keeping their backline together like incredibly well, despite all the goals that have been kicked against them.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as I said, that's just where they are. So, I don't want to rag on them too much because they'll be raked through the coals. So I know what Melbourne media's like.
Oh, yeah, the media is going to dig into them pretty heavily.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's jump over to our individuals for this game, starting with Tom Powell, as you had mentioned it previously. He had probably one of the best games of his career, to be honest. Like, he was phenomenal this week. He finished with 34 disposals, 11 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 8 clearances, 3 goal assists, 5 score involvements, 5 tackles, 22 pressure acts, 9 ground ball gets, 614 meters gained. Veteran Luke Parker was important with pressure going through that midfield and that forward line, of course. He collected 28 touches, 21 of them effective, equating to 75% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 5 intercepts, 5 marks, 8 clearances, 5 score involvements, 8 tackles, 24 pressure acts, and 10 ground ball gets. Toby Pink, as we had also mentioned, was very solid in defense. This is one of the first times we've probably spoken very positively of him. But, he's getting his dues, finally proven himself, I think.
Yeah.
Finished with 13 disposals.
I've said his improvement before, but yeah, this was an actual, really good game.
Yeah, it really was. But yeah, finished with 13 disposals, 12 of them effective, equating to 92.3% efficiency. 4 contested possessions, 7 intercepts, 9 marks, 6 1%ers, and 5 spoils. And then the rising star, as I had mentioned just before, is Finn O'Sullivan. He finished with 18 disposals, 14 of them effective, equating to 77.8% efficiency, 3 score involvements, 15 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, and 239 meters gained. Over on the Carlton front, George Hewitt was excellent at ground level. He collected 31 touches, 18 contested possessions, 5 inside 50s, 8 clearances, 6 score involvements, 8 tackles, 23 pressure acts, and 13 ground ball gets. And then Mitch McGovern, speaking of the McGoverns, we spoke of Mitch earlier upon Jeremy's retirement. He stepped up massively up forward, being the swingman for this week, kicking 4 goals from 16 disposals, 12 of them effective, equating to 75% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 7 marks, and 7 score involvements. On the MRO front, Ollie Hollins was fined $1,000 for contact with an umpire. That's the third one already this week. And George Hewitt fined $6,250 for striking Tristan Sherry. I believe it was just a chest strike sort of thing. So it wasn't super dangerous, but yeah, he's had a couple of instances already this season, so which is why the fine is so high.
Yeah, dangerous for the bank account. It would take a lot to impact Cherry's chest, I would imagine. Though.
Oh yeah,
shouldn't be doing.
He's a strong guy.
Shouldn't be doing.
He'll be all right.
Yeah.
All right. Time to jump over to the Adelaide Oval, where you don't really want to talk about this game, but we got it. I'm sorry. Port Adelaide are hosting the Swans, and they dropped this game pretty badly.
yeah, like this was like the first game this season that really upset me. Partially because the season's still on the line, partially because I had the glimmer of hopes of the last 2 weeks, and partially because Sydney just left the door wide open, asking for Port to come back in and take this game in what was pretty much comedically bad efforts collided into the one game.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you had the comedically bad goal kicking of Sydney, which just managed to thwart Port's comedically bad link up to the forward line. As you know, both will be kicking themselves, but it will be Port that looks down the barrel of an increasingly lost season, whereas Sydney sort of just in it. I mean, both are mathematically only in the finals race, but you know, the optics look a tiny bit better for Sydney. We'll just say the score straight away because there's not too much in terms of the match that was that enthralling. It was 7-10, 52 Port Adelaide to 9-17, 71 Sydney.
Yes.
Yeah. Port, they couldn't maintain possession. Their pressure was okay, but a bit forced because they were always last of the contest.
Mm-hmm.
Their defense was sort of okay for missing Aaliyah. I don't think that's where, even if it was like, 26 scoring shots,
Yes.
I don't think it was that bad. I just think it was like, again, poor decision making off the halfback. It was killing us. Too many handballs as well that were going into the hands of players just about to be tackled. It was absolutely atrocious. And it's sort of, I think, again, I'm not like saying I'm going to bring like a white level of analysis to this, but I have noticed this for Port, where they look like they're going to be threatening,
Mm-hmm.
running in the inside, and sometimes they do break through. But if you like hold away from a bit and attack them from behind, like, because the way Port plays, they're going to bring you to the contest because they like run 3 players straight down the middle, fairly close together. So they're bringing pressure to the contest by themselves. And then the handballer, you know, maybe it gets through, maybe it doesn't. It gets out, and then they kick it wide because they've got no forward line. Mitch Georgiadis is the person they go to, and he's a wide leader. So what do? They just start it wide and kick to him, and it just like pigeons them. And as I said, it's just high risk back half movement for low percentage forward half. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, in terms of Sydney, they had a lot of players back. I think a few people tipped them because they had players back. And like, to be honest, a lot of them were fairly rusty. Not too many of them had a bit impact. It was good to see him back. I think, you know, for them, they were maintaining possessions enough. They were dominating entries. And, you know, it was really just the accuracy that prevented the blowout. Obviously, the big one was Joel Amartey, who scored, 0-6 from 8 scoring shots.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, it was tough. And you know what I mean? It was like, you know, it was just poor execution. And it didn't really matter that Sydney were also turning the ball over because Port only got 2 free from turnover in an error-riddled contest. So it's like, you know, what are we doing here? You know, it was pretty bad.
Wasn't the last time Sydney played the Adelaide Oval is when Joel Amartey kicked 9 against the Crows?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that's why I had a feeling that, like, after the game was over, I was like, I should have tipped them because that was the game he kicked 9. Like, it wasn't for the fact that
it's another team.
Yeah, but it's like the fact that it's more ground familiarity is more what I like. It's because all grounds are different. Like, everyone knows this. All grounds are shaped slightly differently. But it's so part of that can be just ground familiarity. Part of it could be just Port being like the Crows were last year.
Yeah, I don't know. Talking about Joel Amartey though, it is interesting to see how the stats rate him in this game because, like, I mean, it wasn't good.
No,
but at least you know what I mean. It was like, yeah, I mean, technically, like, that's not a bad game what he played.
Well, what his role was fine. He was
Yeah.
technically performing his role.
Oh, he's presenting.
He
Yeah,
was just
exactly.
couldn't score.
But as I said, so, just for the stats out there, he was meant to kick 30 off his own boot. He kicked 5 times less than that with the 6 behind. And because Champion Data hates players not having high disposal efficiency and a behind counts as a missed disposal, he recorded a player rating of negative 10.5. And to put that into perspective, 10's like a good game of football.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying like he had a negative, like, like a 0 is a bad game of football, yeah, so it's pretty not a great time for him, but that's just one you got to forget about. You won anyway, sleep it off.
Exactly right, and that's why like the stats aren't the be all and end all, because
yeah, exactly.
When you look at it on the ground, like he's presenting as a forward, he's taking marks in key positions.
Yeah.
He just couldn't convert. So like for the 90% of the game, he was doing his role as intended.
Yeah.
It's the other.
And we've wanted Sydney to get their traditional forwards into the game.
Yes.
So, take that.
Yeah, we've been speaking for weeks, or months at this point, that the midfield is doing all of the work, pushing up forward. And now we're finally starting to see, especially with the injuries back, especially Papley for note, they're starting to finally get their forward line back together.
Well, hopefully, Papley did come off a bit proppy in this game. So
I think he played like only like 3/4 of the game, something like that.
Yeah, he was just not running all too well after the first quarter. So
Errol Golden, however, chef's kiss. Welcome back, Errol Golden.
Yeah, very solid. Again, took a while to get into the game, but pretty good. Probably the best of the players coming back.
I completely agree. Are you finished with this, or you got a bit more?
Yeah. Look, I was gonna dig into Port a bit more, but I just realized that this would just be like me really hammering that point home. But I will say the other thing about Port, and this links back to their entries and their safe entries, is another thing that's so painful about this is that of those things that go wide, and it's like, yeah, you know what, it goes wide, it goes out of bounds, but the double whammy is that Port are just really bad at ground level in their forward line. And you know what I mean, like that when they were getting the forward, like Georgiadis, he takes a mark, maybe gets a behind, maybe gets a goal, sorry, but if it's a behind, they're not likely to get the forward half intercept. If it's a bowl in, they're not likely to win the contest. So it's just like, where are these scores going to go from? And it's like, like Darcy Byrne-Jones is like a decent player, but in a game like this where it just doesn't suit him, he's going to have no influence.
Yeah.
Sam Powell-Pepper, I will give him his dues. He worked so hard to get a few shots, and he worked up, he did all he could. So, while it wasn't great, he gets a bit of a tick. But then, you got Sweet just hanging around. Like, the ball wasn't going to him. When it was, Grundy was like clearly outperforming him.
Yep.
And, it's just like, what are we doing? Like, I could understand having him for like Max Gawn when, it's like, yeah, like Vicentini is probably not going to last the whole game, but like Grundy isn't a running ruckman anymore.
No.
Like, at least not pace-wise. Like, he's not going to really extend you. So, yeah, and it's in like in an inefficient forward line. We're just playing Sweet. And it's like, what? He's going to hit the ball to no one. There's no one on the ground. Like, what's he going to do bringing the ball to ground? He's not kicking goals. I don't know.
Just on the topic of Grundy, he's now playing a ruck role similar to how like Nankervis and Sherry and Gawn all played their roles. And that's why there's some of the best performing rucks in the league. They're stronger bodied, they're able to take back marks, they're able to bring the ball to ground if unable to take a mark, and they're able to tackle, they're able to apply pressure, they're able to play at ground level. Like that's what that's what the definings of a modern ruckman is. And as much as we wanna see Sweet perform well, I don't think he's that type of ruckman, which is unfortunate. I think Vicentini can shape himself to be that kind of ruckman. I think Vicentini with time can definitely do that. But yeah, I don't think Sweet is the type of ruck to be able to conform to that kind of play style.
And I know it wasn't by design, but then like Finlayson coming on, which was meant to be what's his name? Joe Berry, the one we drafted. He had to pull out.
Yes.
So we're not going to blame the coaching stuff on that one because I'm assuming like they still wanted an attacking player. I don't think they had anyone on the bench to do that, so they just were like, well, I guess we'll roll the dice with Finlayson.
Yeah.
Didn't work, but yeah, as I said, yeah, just real lack of system in the forward half of the ball. I'm still amazed, like, you know, we've persisted with Chad Corns for the last 3 years, considering how arse we've been. But hey, you know, they'll just blame it all on Hinkley. It's more than that.
Now we can just
It's a bit of a problem.
we
but
can talk trash about the Corn brothers or Corns brothers for as
yeah.
long as we want. They're both.
Oh, I like Chad. He just shouldn't be a forward coach.
Maybe he should be more of a defensive coach. Who knows? I don't know.
I don't
Anyway,
know. Anyway, individual players.
let's just move on. On the individuals this week, Isaac Heaney. What can't he do? Absolute champion. He kicked 2-1 from 28 disposals, 13 contested possessions, 3 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 6 score involvements, 4 tackles, 12 pressure acts, and 303 meters gained. Hayden McLean did well with forward pressure, kicking 1-1 from 6 touches, 4 contested possessions, 4 score involvements, 9 1%ers, and 8 spoils. And Tom Papley, after finally returning from injury, played out a solid game. Granted, he played like about 75%, give or take. But he finished with 16 disposals, 4 contested possessions, 5 marks with 3 of them inside 50, 5 inside 50s, 2 behinds, 2 goal assists, 6 score involvements, and 11 pressure acts. Over on Port Adelaide's side, Willem Drew is still providing solid pressure, collecting 17 touches, 7 contested possessions, 5 marks, 3 inside 50s, 2 score involvements, 8 tackles, 25 pressure acts, and 4 1%ers. And then Ryan Burton, I think was pretty important with ball movement, just did the best he could. He finished with 21 disposals, 5 intercepts, 5 score involvements, 4 1%ers, 3 spoils, and 555 meters gained. On the injury front, Miles Bergman came off with a shoulder concern. Hopefully it's not too bad. We'll find out when the injury lists are updated. And on the MRO front, Sam Palpepper was fined $1,000 for... got you there. He was fined $1,000 for striking Nick Blakey.
Yeah, no, I knew that.
I was baiting the contact with an umpire.
Oh no, yeah, I already sort of knew, but yeah, I was like, what's the pause for? But yeah, that's gonna be interesting because it's like, I don't know. It's just like one of those interesting things where it's like, you know, when you hear all those big contracts and you're like, yeah, you'd pay like $1 million for Miles Bergman, and it's like, I know his quality, but like this game was probably like one of his worst. Like he was poor defensively, and his ball use wasn't that great. And it's just like, man, some players that like are rumored to get the big splash of money, you know, I don't know whether it's just because I still want to keep him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's just like an overall thing for Port. It's like their deep backline players are by far, I guess, outperforming, you know, the halfbackers.
Well, they have recently had a lot more to do, to be fair.
Yeah. And it's like Asava Radagalia, like, literally had 8 shots kicked against him. And yeah, I'd still think he's better than like Lockie Jones on the halfback. I think Payne Farrell had a pretty bad game. I know his stats looked all right, but they were just non-threatening disposals. And yeah, I think there was another one that I sort of liked. Actually, no, Josh Sin actually played okay.
Yeah, I think Sin had a decent game. I agree.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway.
Are you done slagging your own team?
I guess so. Sorry, Sydney fans, if you wanted a bit more breakdown. Like, again, yeah, it's hard because they weren't, like, style-wise, like, yeah, they were just fine. You know what I mean? They were a bit scrappy. Their forward-half game worked. It's a bit more to back. And Nick Blakey, absolutely fantastic. Running gun off halfback. I wish Bort had a line breaker like him.
Yeah, I think he's really pushing All Australian because he's had such a good year despite where Sydney are at.
Yeah.
All right. But jumping over to a Saturday night at Marvel Stadium, Collingwood's one hosted game at Marvel Stadium per year because it's in all of the Victorian team contracts. They hosted St Kilda at up until the end of the third quarter, start of the fourth quarter. What a contest!
Absolutely. And I think this one, we talk about coaching a fair bit. This is the one where you got to give Ross a bit credit for because, it's like, yeah, sure, St Kilda weren't really ever gonna win this. Maybe that's a bit harsh, but you know what I mean. Like, it didn't really feel like they were going to. It's more credit to the Magpies. But they just sort of hang along, and it was in a really good way. And, I think it's like, I wrote down it was sort of by ignoring defense, but I'll talk about what it actually means. Because, it was like, how St Kilda in this was like, they had abysmal tackle numbers, just okay possessions. But I think, it was sort of, it was sort of a way to combat Collingwood. Because as we've talked about Collingwood, they love forcing pressure, setting up a high intercept to get that score, to get a high intercept scoring game plan.
Mm-hmm.
I think what the Saints did with some of their shape away from the contest, they didn't allow their turnovers too much to be turned into easy attack. Obviously, just because Collingwood's transition is beautiful, probably the best transition team in the league. A fair chunk did, but you know what I mean? It's like, these things happen.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, and we've talked about this for St Kilda, they don't get that many entries, but, as I said, if they can get in quality enough, they tend to capitalise. And this time it was both Cameron Wood and Darcy Wilson. I think it's Darcy.
That would be Mason Wood and Darcy Wilson.
But what did I say? I can't even.
You said Cameron Wood.
Cameron Wood. Oh, that's an old Collingwood player, I think. Yeah. Anyway. Anyway, they gave them their chance to convert. And they still got enough of ground level. Their ground level game wasn't too bad.
Yes.
And yeah, as I said, while St Kilda though, we're good in the middle. We've seen them be arse in the middle. If they were arse, they would have lost this by 70 points.
Yeah, it would have been.
They're okay. But Collingwood, they just took it to the next level with some great bowl years from the Dacos boys, from Patrick Lipinski, and it would just set enough attack for Collingwood to break away late. Even if they did have to rely on shallow entries to convert in this game, St Kilda defence, pretty mint. They were still able to eke out. It was a 34-point win, but you know what I mean? It felt only just, and yet it felt comfortable at the same time. And the final score line was 16-12, 108 to 11-8, 74.
Yeah, the scoreline might be a 34-point deficit, but that does not tell the whole story because, as we mentioned, it was a really, really tight game up until that fourth quarter where St Kilda just started running out of legs.
Yeah, and, as I said, and that's where it got really hard because, what I also mentioned is, as I said, you can't discredit, as I said, tackling. I'm not going to say it's an overrated stat like I did with defensive one-on-ones, but it's about how you set up pressure. Pressure doesn't just have to be from tackling because, as I said, St Kilda, they're when the ball's loose, we're going to try and ruthlessly go for the contest. They won at ground level. They were pretty good at, what was I going to say? I can't remember, but yeah. So they were just better on the ground, and they were good at not getting sucked in. Like I said about Essendon, they get a bit sucked in, and we've seen teams get sucked into Collingwood, and then they just handball it out. Some of the best hands in the league get burnt, as I said, and that's when they get that pile-on effect where a player covers the player that just handballs it, creates space to another player, which then creates space to the next player because then the player gets sucked in. As I said, that's why you call it a chain of handballs. But St Kilda kept outside shape and at least forced them to win off turnover generation and a solid marking style game. But as I said, even despite that, Collingwood's turnover game is still, or just that speed, that link up, lowering your eyes, finding the best available option in such a small window of time. It's why they're the top team in the league, and it was just too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Collingwood have proven time and again, despite no matter kind of what team they go up against, they're able to just go to another level when threatened. It's a coaching masterclass, but two, it's a player masterclass because they all just hit the switch, step up. It's insane.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like something, and because it's so distribution heavy, as I said, like this year we haven't seen like a lot of Collingwood players get too many like high rated or like sexy numbers games. As I said, even Dacos. He had a terrific game this game, stats wise. But you know what I mean? Like some of his ratings have been a bit whatever, like lowish possessions, but you know what I mean? It's so even that just doesn't matter at all. Like they're gonna get players involved. They don't care who does it. But if they needed Nick Dacos to step up like in this game, then he just comes in and bam.
And
It was one of the best games.
I was I can't
without,
remember. Yeah, I can't remember like what I was listening to or what I was watching, but they were talking about like tagging for like players. I think in this case it was Windhager. Was on Nick Dacos as a tag, and they were talking about like who really should be getting tagged in this Collingwood outfit. Is it Nick Dacos? Is it Josh Dacos? Is it Jack Crisp? Is it a bunch of their other ball I'm blanking right now, but like there's a ton of other ball movers that they have, and they're all incredible. Like their entire midfield, half forward, half back, they gel so well that it's hard. Like no matter who you tag, like there's someone else is always going to step up and just completely change the way their game is played.
And it's two-way running too. Like they create space so quickly, so it's like you can put a tag on, but the danger is like, as I said before, it is playing too close against Collingwood. And I will say that's probably, I'm not sure if it was a mistake or not, but you know, it's just, I don't really see the value of like, well, it depends what you want to do with a hard tag, I guess. So like in this contest, it's like St Kilda, okay, we're going to win in the contest, you know. I know, you know, Nick Dacos isn't the most contested player ever, but he does win a fair amount of ground ball. So it's like, you want to win by ground ball? Yeah, I understand taking Dacos a bit. But it's not going to nullify their ball movement.
No.
And that's what you got to understand. So I think it just really depends on what you want to do. And it's like, you know, again, probably the least thing that worked out of this plan, but I don't think Saints midfield was bad enough to say that that was like an outright mistake. It's just, yeah, as I said, when you got the quality of Collingwood, you know, it's just, what do you do sometimes?
Yeah, I think, like
as I said, like St Kilda were disciplined, but you know what I mean? It's just like, you know, unless you're a upper echelon team, it's going to be very hard to actually outmuscle it.
Well, the fact that, like, again, up until the end of the third quarter, this game was extremely close is, like, a big credit to the Saints, for one. Like, for actually being able to contend with the team on top of the ladder. And it's just, it shows that teams can structure well against Collingwood. They can throw multiple things at them and really test them. But it's just,
exactly.
It's just a credit to Collingwood as an entire organization at this point. That they're able to just completely bounce back, completely flip the game on its head. Granted, you know, St Kilda still a fairly young team for the most part. This in terms of like generalized players across the ground. Like obviously they have their own talent, but like a lot of their players are really young, so that like running out of legs is kind of a natural thing. But
just because I have it here, on age 3 years younger in this game, and by experience nearly 50 games less. So Collingwood average 158 or 159 games experience rounded. St Kilda 106.
How does that change if you take out Pendlebury and Sidebottom?
Oh, I can't do that.
You could probably take out.
But it would.
You could probably take out Jamie Elliott in that as well. Actually, if you take out Membry, Elliott, Sidebottom, Pendlebury, how does that change? Because that's a lot of experience.
If your grandmother was a bike territory, you know what I mean? It's like that's who they put out. You know, that's the age profile. So,
but like just on the topic of that, the fact that they're all like mid to late I was going to say mid to late 30s, but they're all mid 30s players. Pendlebury's like pushing late 30s, and are all still giving it 100%. For the most part, Membry doesn't have to do super much playing it full forward for the most part. But for everyone else, like they're doing so much despite their age and their limitations. I'll
say this:
so much credit to like the conditioning team.
Yeah, it's like they made a big thing of it. But when you look at their list, it's like they've got players in every age profile that's firing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you got the youngsters, like, or even like, okay, yeah, 2 or 3 year players, Josh and Nick Dacos.
Yes.
A bit older than that, Patrick Lipinski. A
Yes.
bit older than that, Jack Crisp.
Ned
A
Long
bit
can go
younger
in there
than
as
that,
well.
Edward Allen. You know, Ned Long. Even as I said, the people that they were bringing, Daniel McStay does enough as a veteran presence.
Jeremy
Billy
Howe.
Frampton, you know, Jeremy Howe was brought in a bit of a
Oh yeah, but like
okay.
he's a veteran
I get what
talent.
you mean. Oh yeah, I get you. So as I said, it's every age profile in that regard.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
it's crazy how they've been able to do it so well for so long too.
yeah.
Well, and on the flip side, you look at Geelong in that regard, and Geelong have been consistent for so long, whereas Collingwood did have a minor dip
Mm.
in like the mid to late 2010s, and only have like started coming back in the past 5-6 years.
Yeah.
But
And
anyway,
look, there's a bit of advantage for Victorian recruiting, but I think it's still fair to say that it's coupled with some of the better list management. Because again, like even a few years ago, I still wasn't rating Collingwood's list. I still thought there was a few players that are like, yeah, they don't really seem like they're going to be players that are going to be playing in a few years. But they just keep on getting good games out of them, and then they become mainstays, and you're like, oh, they're actually a dangerous list now.
yeah, like that's the difference. Experience and time can change. And Collingwood have been giving that to the right players, and it's been working out in spades. But anyway, let's jump over to our individuals, and I'm going to start with Darcy Cameron, who competed really, really well against Rowan Marshall this week. He got 28 hitouts with 10 to advantage, and kicked 2-1 from 19 disposals, 12 contested possessions, 8 marks with 5 of them inside 50, 6 clearances, 8 score involvements, 11 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, and 436 meters gained. Nick Dacos was prolific on ball, despite the fact that he was getting tagged by Marcus Windhager. He kicked a goal from 30 touches, 22 of them effective, equating to 73.3% efficiency, 14 contested possessions, 9 intercepts, 9 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 2 goal assists, 9 score involvements, and 416 meters gained. And then Jack Crisp, my bull in the middle that I'm a big fan of. He was very solid with pressure this week, as per usual. He also kicked a goal with 16 disposals, 12 effective, equating to 75% efficiency, 6 contested possessions, 6 marks, 6 score involvements, 10 tackles, 28 pressure acts, and 3 1%ers. For St Kilda, Mason Wood did really well up forward, slotting 3-1 from 15 touches, 13 effective, equating to 86.7% efficiency, 4 contested possessions, 7 marks with 3 of them inside 50, 7 score involvements, 2 1%ers, and 2 spoils. And then Isaiah Wanganeen Millera had another important movement game, finishing with 25 touches, 20. No, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, I did bad math here. Maybe I'm at 35 touches. I think I'm at 35 touches.
35.
Um,
Yeah.
with 27 of those effective, equating to 77.1% efficiency, 11 contested possessions, 8 intercepts, 7 marks, 3 clearances, 6 score involvements, 3 1%ers, and 632 meters gained. And shout out to debutant Alex Toru, who finally got to debut after his suspension in the VFL. He should have debuted 4 weeks ago, but it is what it is. He's here now. He finished with 9 disposals, 3 intercepts, 6 marks, 3 score involvements, 2 tackles, 6 1%ers, and 6 spoils. On the injury front, Bo McCreary was subbed off with hamstring awareness, which is unfortunate because he was, stats wise, he was subbed out really, really early. But if you look at his stats, he was already projected to have a monster game for Collingwood, which is
he's a very
crazy,
underrated part of that Collingwood forward line because he doesn't put goals in, but he just immense tackling pressure, tackles inside 50. I don't know who would be leading it, but he would be up there.
I think he's definitely up there, or at least for Collingwood, for that front.
Yeah.
And then Mateus Filippo, who was really hoping to come back this week, had to be a really, really late change due to his calf. It's the one he's been having issues with for the past month. So hopefully it's not too bad. Hopefully we'll be able to play next week. Fingers are crossed.
Yeah, you would hope so.
On the MRO front, there's a couple. Marcus Windhager was fined $1,000 for striking Nick Dacos. Again, he was tagging him, so he got a little bit too brutal. Jack McRae was fined at $3,125 for contact with an umpire. It's a not the first time he's done it this year. And then Dan McStay was fined
No.
$1,000 for tripping Isaiah Wanganeen Miller.
Yeah, well, as I said, it was a surprisingly good contest. But I think we can go to what was sort of expected to be one of the more interesting contests of the Sunday games.
Well,
That was
this
the
was
expansion cup.
definitely the most interesting game out of the Sunday games. But I think this was probably, I know Geelong Brisbane was probably touted to be game of the round, but I think this was really game of the round. So let's
Honestly, yeah,
jumping up to
exactly.
NG Stadium, where the Giants hosted the Suns for the expansion cup.
And look, it's been a one-way contest for most of its lifespan. Obviously, only named the expansion cup 2 years ago by GWS's social media team. But everyone sort of unofficially kept tabs on it. And yeah, so GWS seemingly had the wood over the Suns. I think it's like 14-1 after this game.
Yeah, it's a pretty one-sided affair.
Yeah. However, a quick 25-0 early lead by the Gold Coast Suns, donning the Eagles jersey, made it look easy to start with. Before Riccardi, he capitalized on a bizarre 50-meter soon after a Jed Walters shank. And I think that would be the story of the rest of the game, as a much more efficient GWS team made up for the Suns having territory dominance, but not quite converting. Yeah, as I said, I don't know if you saw this. Did you watch this game?
Yeah, I did watch this game.
Okay, because I was going to say, and what I was referring to, the bizarre 50-meter, because I've never seen it.
I didn't see the 50-meter, though.
Okay, so this was Mac Andrews. He was standing on the mark, and Riccardi was about to take a shot from 50. And then Bailey Humphries runs over to the umpire and he's saying, play on. Like, he wants him to call play on. Mac Andrews think the umpire is saying play on.
Oh, so he moves.
Obviously, in your mind, you should have heard the whistle, but, obviously, you don't really think of that. Runs up, gives away a 50-meter. It was not his day. Mac Andrews, unfortunately, had a bit of a stinker. But
he did.
Yeah, that one not really his fault. And yeah, it's the first time because I was seeing the replay, they were trying to dissect it, and they're like saying Bailey Humphries got it. Like, I would have thought that was like a cheeky tactic from GWS. You know what I mean? Try and coax it, but you get done in by your own squad, it feels bad.
Yeah, it's a bit rough.
Yeah, but anyway, so it was 7-6 to 4-1 in the first quarter. It should have been more, as the Suns had 72% time in forward half, and a few terrible set shots sort of, offset a brilliant Ainsworth goal. I think it was Ainsworth. It was on the boundary. It was a very great shot. So, but from there on out, it started off with a bit of stalling. GWS didn't get many goals back, but they did limit the scoring, drawing even for a couple of quarters before a last-minute bid by Jake Stringer, the Greens, both Toby and
Tom.
What's the other one?
Tom.
Tom. Thank you. Sorry. And also Toby Bedford as well. He had a very good last quarter. Gave him a pinch. Gave another close game to GWS, and the Suns' 8th spot in jeopardy. The final score was 16-10, 106 to 14-15, 99. As now the likely 3 contenders for that 7th and 8th position is Freo, Western Bulldogs, and the Sun. And if you can do math like me, Lazy, you do 3 does not fit into 2.
Correct.
There's likely gonna be one sore team from 3 teams that have had like good parts to the season, but have left the door open to disappoint their fans.
Yeah, and the kind of the flip side of this is that like you look at each of the teams runs home, and they're all kind of on the same sort of level of difficulty, where it's
genuinely games.
It could go either way for any of the teams that are vying for like the last 3, quote unquote 3 spots. Like we know that the top 5, maybe top 6 is basically locked in. They're not going to fall out of the 8. But yeah, the 7th and 8th slot pretty much vying for like 3, maybe 4 teams if we do the math. It's gonna be a pretty rough go at it in the last what,
Yeah.
7-8 weeks.
Yeah, I know GWS is technically 7th, but I think they've actually performed well enough. Hawthorn is actually like they're still a bit iffy, but I think it would be a big surprise to see him drop out.
Mm.
And I know Fremantle's won 5 in a row. I still maintain they look a bit. They don't look that clinical. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some shakier waters ahead as the schedule gets tough for them. But
Yeah.
we'll talk about that a bit later. What will be said about this orange tsunami as, they were lethal from halfback, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But compare it to Gold Coast, which were the collapsing star of halfback in terms of trying to generate a score. From deep, Gold Coast were half as potent scoring compared to GWS. And the back half as a whole was 7-5 to Gold Coast to 1-6 for the Gold Coast. I think I meant GWS 7-5, sorry.
Yeah, makes a little bit more sense.
So, you know what I mean? It was like, for the Suns, forward half, absolutely fantastic. 5-4 from centre bounce. Absolutely amazing. But if you still don't focus on your movement, you can get burned. And especially against a team like GWS, who can get that early intercept. They got 12-5 from intercepts in general, or scores off turnover, I should say. It means you have to score at a higher rate of knots to keep up. You know what I mean? Like, as good as you can be from the center, a lot more teams, they have to rely on a good mix from, forward and, I mean, it makes sense. It's like 90% of the ground if it's like forward half and back half, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, you have to be somewhat balanced, If you're not going to score off turnover, you have to keep it fairly tight, at least force it to stoppage. And in terms of the intercept count, you can actually sort of tell because, again, it was close, but a lot of Gold Coast were deeper. Your Sam Collins, your Bodie Ullens. It was more last line of defense. While GWS were getting less deep intercepts, but like a lot more around the ground. And I will say, like, the only players in the center to both get a few intercepts and score involvements for the Gold Coast were Anderson and Rao, who were absolutely playing the lights out. Like Fiorini, Closey, and Flanders, they played outside games and were solid enough, but it was more so when the ball was already in their forward half, more than providing that link up.
Yeah.
And as I said, as good as Anderson and Rao were, I think it was a tiny bit concerning that a lot of it was literally just them generating. And it dropped off when Anderson wasn't as involved in the second and third quarter. And I say that comparatively because he was pretty great for the entire game.
Yeah, it's like the fact that this game was so close shows the Suns' development for one. The fact that they really have become a high threatening team. Well, they've been in the 8 up until now, so that shows one thing. But the fact that the Giants, even without Sam Taylor being their key in defense, were able to claw this game back, were able to generate off of their halfback and their turnovers. They played a decent intercept game as well, which was really, really good. And they were also really, really good at ground level, which I think that a lot of that credit does go to Bedford. Now, granted, he's been playing a lot more of a tagging role recently, but he's still really good at ground level and was able to generate quite a bit off of that. And then, obviously, with Riccardi showing up, as he has been the past couple of weeks, like that's especially with Stringer being the sub. Hogan hasn't really had a great couple of weeks recently. Obviously we've talked about Cadman stepping up finally, really coming into his own now in the past couple of games. Like this Giants forward line is starting to be like a major threat, a lot more than it was last year.
Yeah, I still think connection could use a bit of work on, but I think it's one of those things. And again, a couple of those were like from a few. Like, I don't think the Gold Coast Suns had their best game defensively. I will say that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But you know what I mean? It's like at least they're converting enough. Because as I said, like when it was like that very dour game, also like a few dour games, like at the first end of the season. where it was pretty much nothing.
Mm.
Like, it was a lot of movement relating to nothing. Where at least they're like, okay, we're going to get a lot more entries. They're not all going to be perfect. But if we can get enough forward involved, as I said, the talent will eventually win out in most cases. And I think this was a bit of proof there because, yeah, as I said, the Giants are a great team if they can get the ball in their forward line. They don't necessarily have the means to do it. Again, salary cap competition, they pay a lot of money for like their forward line and their back line. Their midfield is a bit air, and we saw obviously the Gold Coast take full advantage of that. But as I said, some of the other pieces are more than good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of these teams really still insanely threatening for the top 8. It'll be interesting to see what happens as the end of the season starts to unfold. All right, jumping over to our individuals, and I will start with Jake Riccardi. He contended well around the ground, when he had to chip in the ruck towards the end of the game. He got 3 hitouts with 1 to advantage, and he kicked 2-1 from 15 disposals, 4 contested possessions, 7 marks, 4 inside 50s, 2 goal assists, 7 score involvements, 6 tackles, 17 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, 3 spoils, 4 31 meters gained. Tom Green was explosive in the midfield. He kicked 1-2 from 31 touches, 22 contested possessions, 16 clearances, 7 score involvements, 9 tackles, 30 pressure acts, 13 ground ball gets, and 427 meters gained. And Connor Iden performed really, really well off of intercept this week. He finished with 15 disposals, 13 of them effective, equating to 86.7% efficiency, 5 contested possessions, 7 intercepts, 10 marks, with 4 of them being intercept marks, 2 1%ers, and 2 spoils. Over for the Suns, Jared Witts had full control of the ruck and held his own around the ground. Again, I think he's become one of the more top-tier Premier ruckmen this season, so it's been really, really entertaining to watch him. He finished with 54 hitouts, with 18 of them to advantage, and kicked a goal from 20 touches, 16 contested possessions, 5 inside 50, 6 clearances, 7 score involvements, 7 tackles, 15 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, and 2 spoils. And Bailey Humphrey, despite that awkward 50-meter penalty against McAndrew that he caused, he was very effective pushing forward, kicking 2-3 from 23 disposals, 18 of them effective, equating to 78.3% efficiency, 12 contested possessions, 5 marks with 3 of them inside 50, 5 inside 50s, 2 goal assists, 13 score involvements, 10 pressure acts, and 9 ground ball gets. On the injury front, Lockie Whitfield sadly was concussed during this match, so he will be out. Actually, I think the Giants have to bye this week, so he's not going to really miss anything, which is positive. Hopefully, there's no super serious outcome.
I already got the concussion, but it's the best possible outcome.
Yeah, post-recovery, hopefully he's all right. And then on the MRO front, there's a couple here. So Jake Riccardi was fined $2,000 for tripping Dan Rioli. Matt Rowell was fined $3,125 for contact with an umpire. And Toby Green was fined $1,875 for contact with an umpire.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. And I guess I'm going to finish off with a tiny point about discipline. And I think, as I said, I think last year and just, of vibes, I think we've sort of questioned over the year, I guess like the purpose of such a tall forward line for the Giants, that being all of Brown, Cadman, Riccardi, and obviously Jesse Hogan. But when you look at these two teams, and they do play a setup, because obviously they're blooding in Ethan Reed and Jed Walters.
Yes.
Also swung Mac Andrews when he wasn't getting involved in the back line. And I just think, as I said, I think Western Sydney now is actually the sort of thing that the Gold Coast want to inspire to. Because Gold Coast, for all the good things they're doing, as I said, they're a bit like Sydney last year. They're still relying on a lot of midfielders to pump up their scores. But, you know what I mean? As I said, we've seen Riccardi now. As I said, last year, it was about going missing. Like, not putting the efforts off the ball. That improved. Looks miles better. Callum Brown, you know what I mean? It's like not getting enough scoreboard impact. Now he's kicking, a few goals every game. Aaron Cadman not converting enough from his good leading patterns. And now he's getting a few set shots per game to go through. And, sometimes it can only take a year. But that's why you've got to be, strong about these, young kids being disciplined, and you know what I mean. And it was just like one of those things where, when you see the Jed Walters kick on goal, you know what I mean. It's like he's got his spot, but he just doesn't look confident.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. And it's like you just want something, even if it makes it more, even if it's like, it's like you're taking a bit uncomfortable, bring him up the ground, because we know Ben King plays deep.
Yes.
Like his only role is deep. That's what I want to see. Like Ethan Reid and Jed Walters. It's like, you know what? Like I know you would rather play like tall down the ground, but we want you to come up a bit. We want you to get involved in more than just goal scoring, because we need you to do that to be a legitimate threat. And it's going to be a lot more structure to do that, because you're not going to get those benefits straight away.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, like GWS, like that sort of forward line is what you can get if you put those efforts in.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that all of the Giants players who have been severely underperforming are now starting to come into their own at a great time too. Granted, going into the bye, it doesn't always end out well on the other side sometimes, but they hit a good point. If they're able to keep this consistency up, and once the Giants get Sam Taylor back, because they definitely miss him, they will be so much more threatening. And granted, they already are threatening, but it's just that upper echelon that they're trying to push.
And it's the old adage, like height doesn't get tired. You know what I mean? It's like if Gold Coast midfield drops off, their scoring dries up.
Yeah.
Whereas I know you could say that, but you know what I mean? It shouldn't just happen because of like, young players getting tired. You know what I mean? So they'll have that skeleton structure. That should be able to still perform in finals. Whereas I said, like, I'm a bit flighty on Gold Coast. I don't think they'll win a finals game. I still think they're a good chance to make it. But as I said, it's a good start to getting consistency. But there'll be things they'll tweak that will get them to legitimate threatening. But yeah, they just have to make finals.
Yeah, agreed. I don't think they're too worried about whether they win a final. They just have to make it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Time for our last game of the round. A game that I think we all expected the outcome on, including Richmond fans. Although it would have been nice to see a little bit more of a stronger contention. But it's the Bulldogs hosting Richmond at Marvel Stadium.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't really caught up much of the highlights of this game. I haven't. As I said, the time I spent to dedicate writing on this game, I was feeling a bit rubbish. So, just honestly on fields, like for the Bulldogs, it's one of the most Bulldogs-esque beatdowns you can get. A lot of points off turnovers, a lot in the forward half. Richmond, unfortunately, one of the higher in terms of teams scoring off turnovers. It was that bad mix. Like, this is just a team that the Bulldogs want to get. I think the disappointment is that, as I said, you provide a bit of pressure, but it was all, from what I understand, it was all just like chasing. You know what I mean?
It was.
Like, they couldn't get their way in a position to just win a contest, to just get a win somewhere on the field. And, as I said, it's like, oh yeah, they got a lot of youngsters. Again, this is where the part of the season where like having, what is it? Like, I think you mentioned it, 6 out of 8 of your 2024 draft haul.
Yeah, I do mention that when I go into the individuals.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's the downside of like having that. But at the same time, as I said, they're just, the few players that are really struggling at the moment, they just can't get out of the rotation because they don't have too many players to go to. And as I said, the Bulldogs, again, it was very balanced.
Mm-hmm.
It was wins on the outside, not just the inside midfield. Forward line conversion was pretty good. Sam Darcy, like, absolutely fantastic. I mean, he could legitimately be All Australian. In terms of the games he's played, he's definitely been the most consistent.
Even with the injury wiping him out, like he's been the most consistent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, obviously hasn't played against like a really good defensive side yet, but I still think, as I said, it's like, 9 goals in 2 games on return? Like, just how good.
He's a monster. I don't know how he does it. He leads well.
Yeah.
He has great hands. Granted,
8 marks for the game.
yeah, and he's able to bring the ball to ground as well. Like he's one of those key forwards that actually does the role of a key forward, like almost to perfection.
Yeah, exactly.
And
and as I said, in terms of the other side, of course, it's just like Richmond. It's like, I mean, to be fair, they actually didn't, for how little for how little inside 50s they generated, they weren't too bad at getting shots from them. But yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag, really.
Yeah. It's how I expected the game to go, to be honest.
Yeah, as I said, it's just that lack of resistance in ball movement, really.
Yeah, it feels like we're still missing a lot when in reality we just don't have the experience yet. We don't have the game time into the kids yet to get to the level that we want to be, which means we're gonna have to take a lot of these beatings. Thankfully, none of them have been by over 100 points, except for I think one, which has been nice. So we're still at least keeping it under like a huge margin, but we're still getting beat down pretty bad. But it's a learning experience. It's just how rebuilds go. Like there's nothing we can really do about it.
Yeah. And I will say the one positive thing, because there wasn't much for Richmond, and I know it's a low score, but they still kicked 3 goals from stoppages, 1 from the centre bounce, and that is where their best players arguably lie.
Yes.
For them, so they're still at least getting something from where the experience is.
And that's our veteran midfielders in Toronto, Hopper and Prestia doing all of that work.
Yeah.
And a little bit of Loston as well when he's pushed up a little bit. He does tend to float when he's able to.
Yeah.
But I may as well jump onto the individuals because there isn't really too much, as we had said. So Captain Marcus Bontempelli, wonderful game, absolutely dominant game in that midfield. Kicked 3 goals from 36 disposals, 30 of them effective, equated to 83.3% efficiency, 15 contested possessions, 4 intercepts, 11 inside 50s, 7 clearances, 4 goal assists, 12 score involvements, 11 pressure acts, 13 grab ball gets, and 716 meters gained. Rory Lobb dominated defense, which is really, I do find really interesting now that he's such a mainstay in the Bulldogs defense when he was struggling so much to break into a consistent forward line.
Yeah, and it's like, even last year, I was like, he's getting like really good intercepts, but like it's still questionable how much of a one-on-one defender he'll be in periods of times where he's had to play that role because of injuries. But is able to be fairly disciplined.
Well, now that he's had like a proper preseason with the defensive team, he's looked so much better and so much more consistent. Like honestly, kind of a masterclass by Beveridge to put him back there.
I mean, whether it's a master, you know what I mean? It's just like,
I mean, it was primarily due to injury because of his height and his build.
Yeah.
But,
Exactly. But you know what I mean? It's like, they've struggled. They would be very thin on that position if they didn't try something. So it was a good proactive move.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about that.
But yes, he finished with 21 touches, 16 of them effective, equating to 76.2% efficiency, 7 test possessions, 9 intercepts, 13 marks, 2 score involvements, 12 1%ers, 9 spoils, and 100% time on ground. Joel Frazier was influential around the ground. I did hear the commentators pronounce his last name, which is why I now know how to say it. He collected 18 disposals, 16 of them contested. I do this every time. 16 of them effective, equating to 88.9% efficiency. 5 contested possessions, 3 inside 50s, 5 clearances, a behind, 2 goal assists, 7 score involvements, and 15 pressure acts. Tom Lynch was decent up forward. He kind of did what he could with what was given to him. He kicked 3-1 from 8 touches, 5 contested possessions, 5 marks with 4 of them contested, but all of them were inside 50, 6 score involvements, and 2 1%ers. Tim Taranto kept up the pressure in the midfield, doing the best that he could. 28 disposals, 20 of them effective, equating to 71.4% efficiency, 14 contested possessions, 4 inside 50, 6 clearances, 6 score involvements, 6 tackles, 24 pressure acts, and 2 1%ers. And then shout out to our debutant Jesper Olga, who finished with 3 disposals, 2 contested possessions, 2 score involvements, 5 pressure acts, and He is the 6th of our 8 2024 draftees debuted. The two that haven't debuted yet being Josh Smiley and Taj Houghton, who recently came back from his ACL injury and played in the VFL opener game for that was also played at Marvel. And from what we've seen, I played it out. I think he only played half a game because again, coming back from an ACL. But he looked good. So our future's still looking bright.
Yeah, and as I said, for the Tigers, there's no rush. As I said, unfortunately, it's probably a bit slower than they would like getting some of the players back from last year's ACLs. But I think, again, those early wins in the season, you know what I mean? It's like they're paying a bit for it now, but you know what I mean? If they take the time, they can still get some scalps at the end of the year.
Yeah.
You know, when, teams start getting a bit tired. Maybe there's a few dead rubbers that they can catch teams on surprise. You know, again, like the teams at the ports. I don't think they're playing again, but like Carlton, Sydney, whoever they might be, Melbourne.
Yeah, there might be a couple in there.
That era of team.
Just on that, like the only two ACLs that are still on the sidelines is obviously Judson Clark, who redid his ACL, very sad. And Josh Gibcus, who they're taking the time with because he did his second ACL pretty much back to back. So they want to make sure they get it right. It's a fair chance he doesn't come back this season. I'm expecting that. They'll wait until hopefully the next preseason. Hopefully gives him. I know he's training, but he's not like doing full proper training because he's still quite a while away. But yeah, like otherwise on the injury front, we're looking pretty good. Like Lafau is back. Tyler Young's back. Obviously, with Taj Houghton is finally back. Granted, we recruited him with his ACL, so that was always kind of the plan because he was originally like early on he was touted as the potential number 1 draft pick, and then he did his ACL, which kind of knocked him down a little bit. So we basically got him for a steal, but still within the first round.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes they're the players that come out really well. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think sometimes too, it's like when you're actually young, I'm not saying like it's a good thing to do your ACL when you're young, but when you go through that rehabilitation process and you go through like when you have to go through the process of like learning positioning through your body, what you can and can't do sort of thing, it makes you more aware of play. You're not just like running off and you know what I mean? It's like when you're a kid, you're normally like the best to ever do it. You're dominating whatever high school league you're in, and you're just like using your speed, getting to the best positions because you're just used to always doing that. Whereas sometimes, as I said, it's not great because obviously you'll learn that anyway through not getting injured and have a better, more fun time. But as I said, sometimes that's like, something that you can work on if you're disciplined, and so hopefully that will be a good sign when he comes back if he's able to adopt some of that.
Fingers are crossed. On the injury front, however, Adam Treloar did have to be subbed out with calf tightness. He's had most recent issues of soft tissue over the past couple of years, so they're trying to be really, really conservative with him and his with his calves especially. So hopefully it's not super, super bad. Apparently it's a significant concern, but I won't 100% guarantee that until the injury lists are updated. And then Riley Sanders was a late change with illness, but it didn't really matter. It's neither here nor there. And then on the MRO front, Steely Green was fined $2,000 for striking Rory Lobb, which I find really funny because Rory Lobb is tall and Steely Green is like really short. So that's a little interesting.
One year would be like, I wonder if he actually felt that.
Yeah, don't know. Like Rory Lobb's big-bodied, so he might not have felt it at all. But maybe that is the round that was. So let's preview the round ahead.
Right, and we have got the underperforming blockbuster cup, Port versus Carlton.
It really
Adelaide
is.
Oval, a Thursday night. A Port team that's good at winning the ball and not doing much with it from the middle versus a Carlton midfielder forward line that's good at winning the ball and not doing much with it. who will win out this arm wrestle? We'll start with a non-biased opinion. Do you have any thoughts, Blazy?
My non-biased opinion is I think Port are just a better side and should win this. That's all. Like I also think Carlton. I think Carlton should have a strong fight back after the absolute huge performances they've had recently, and Vossi not being happy with them at all. Like I'd like to hope that he's kind of given them marching orders. I think Port will have a stronger bounce back after their game against Sydney. I think they match up a lot better against Carlton for one as well. But it's just if they get their game plan going, I think Port will run away with this. It won't be a huge margin, but I think Port should win.
Yeah, it's just the thing. It's like, I think turnovers is going to be a big part of this game as well, because I think it's one of those teams that both of these two teams can generate turnovers, but not necessarily good at capitalizing on it. Not many, like these teams are also pretty garbage on the ground level. They don't tend to generate many shots from general play. So it might actually be, a Port's backline, if they can get, and it is rumored that, again, Lukosius might be able to get in. But you know what I mean? It's just generated like one or two opportunistic goals at times. I don't think this will be a very high scoring game. And you know what I mean? It's like one of those ones where, a team might get a bit of momentum, might stop scoring for a while. Another team might get a momentum, stop scoring for a while. You know what? I'm going to say both of these teams will have a 1-goal quarter, 1 or 0. That's my weird prediction of the game. That's how much confidence I have.
Yeah, you know
going in.
I respect it. Honestly, with how both these teams performing, I respect it.
Yeah, so we're going early. I've forgotten what my one was last week, but I'm going to say it was correct because I refuse to believe.
Honestly, it might have been. With the way that this season is going, it might have been.
Yeah.
Jumping over to our Friday night game, because I don't think we really have to say much more on that one.
Nah.
It's a potential blockbuster, honestly, with Sydney kind of stepping up and getting some pieces back this last week. The Swans are hosting the Doggies at the SCG.
Yeah, and this is like, I don't think it's like a danger game for the Bulldogs, but I think this is one that they're going to have to go like, they can't afford to like just think, oh yeah, the Swans are a bit crap this year. Because again, as we mentioned, they've gotten a game into their players. They weren't pretty, but it was good reps for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I mean? It's like, the biggest thing is obviously their back line. Like, if the Bulldogs are able to get the ball into their forward line enough, they should just, I don't think they'll have any trouble generating set shots. It's another one where a player like Sam Darcy should be able to generate a good matchup.
Yeah.
But it's that midfield to forward line connection. As I said, the Bulldogs, again, we said how good Rory Lobb is, but like even in the Richmond game, like the two others that were playing deep was Nick Caulfield and the improved James Adel.
Yes.
So, I'd say Caulfield's still the weaker link. I always forget that he plays still. So it's good to see him back. Well, he did skip a couple of years, didn't he? It was weird.
Possibly.
He played for the Saints.
Can't remember.
I think it was like, he's a bit too injured to play, and then goes plays VFL for either 1 or 2 years.
It could have been an injury thing, could have been a COVID thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's he's kind of fit really well into that Bulldogs lineup. He's just he's probably the weakest link at this point in time.
Yeah, well, as I said, it's not like the Bulldogs are actually a like top 8 defense. It's just that they're good at getting enough out of them.
Yeah.
So as I said, if Sydney can get those conventional shots, hopefully Papley can get a few more chances and uninterrupted attempt at generating a ground level game.
Mm-hmm.
They may be able to score with them. But I think 9 times out of 10, like A, the Bulldogs are probably going to score more, and B, I'm not sure if the Swans will actually score all that well.
Yeah.
But I think there's a chance they'll run with them.
It's a pretty 50-50 chance, to be honest. Like, I think the Dogs will 100%. Well, maybe not 100%, but like they should convincingly win this. But I think Sydney, now that they've got that game, they've got some of their players back. I think they will really take the fight to them and make it a hard contest.
I think it's edging towards trap territory. That's what I would say for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, if they drop this game, it is a little concerning.
Yeah,
but it's definitely not like danger just yet because some of the games that they've got coming up, like they should
honestly,
win.
I think
like,
this might be the last time they leave Victoria. It's pretty ridiculous.
It might be. We'll definitely have a look at it in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
All right, jumping over.
Place for the final 5 rounds.
I know
that should be.
Season's gone by quick.
We'll do a little thing on that. Yeah.
Saturday games. Gold Coast versus the Demons. Up on the Gold Coast, of course.
Yeah.
I
feel like the Demons were okay for a bit, but then like
they slipped terrible. A little. They're coming up with a bye, so it's also again 50-50.
Yeah.
I think the Suns should probably run away with this pretty convincingly. Demons, depending on if they get anyone key back, I don't know if they had any injuries going into the bye. They should match up fairly well, at least defensively. I think Melbourne have a better defense to the Suns forwards. But I think on the rest of the ground, I think the fact that the Suns midfield is younger and stronger, apart from maybe like Viney, because Viney's still a really hard nut at it. Like they should get the ball like midfield to forward line pretty convincingly. They might have to play a little bit more ground level than aerially because of May and Lever. But we'll see.
Yeah, no, apart from Charlie Spargo, they don't really have anyone else. So, yeah, I think that's just like Melbourne being pretty tepid. But yeah, you're right. Like, I won't say they're harder, but the Suns are good at generating offense from the ball use. Whereas Melbourne, they might be a bit more grindy. They might be a bit better at ground level, but you don't trust anything would come from their attack. And the Suns' defense, again, had a bad game, but I think, are solid enough to rebound. And obviously that forward line conversion, again, because they don't necessarily rely on their tools, I don't think they'll have a problem scoring against Melbourne.
No, I think it should be.
You know what I mean?
Should be pretty convincing.
It'd be fairly one-sided, but I wouldn't be surprised if Melbourne put up a fight. At least better than their last matchup.
Oh, yeah.
Which was the 58-point flogging at the MCG earlier.
Yeah, I agreed. One matchup I am very interested to see is the Wits v Gawn matchup. I think that's going to be very exciting for ruck fanatics, if there are many out there. I do enjoy a good ruck battle.
Oh, I actually want to see the. I'm going to get the player stats for that up. I got my stats, so I'll be able to tell you the hit whiz. Max Gong got 11 hitouts to advantage at a hitouts win at 46, whereas Wits got 38 with 12 hitouts to advantage, and
somewhat even.
Yeah, I think possession-wise, they both had a reasonable game too. I can't find them though. Gorn had 15, Wits had 13, so still involved around the ground too. Yeah,
it's sort of like you can tell rucks are fairly evenly matched when they have very, very similar stats.
Yeah,
and that's what makes it a really interesting game, especially like when they're tackling as well, and they're applying pressure as well as doing hit outs and like disposal ball usage, etc.
I don't think Wits is a heavy tackler. Gorn gets a few more.
No. I think it's mostly Nankervis and Sherry that I've seen be the major like ruck tacklers. Grundy as well is starting to do that a lot more.
Yeah.
But I think Gorn and Wits could definitely work it a little bit more into their games. Speaking
I don't think Wits needs to. He's a bit too big. I get you.
Speaking of another interesting ruck battle, we're heading down to the traditional Tassie game between the Hawthorn and North Melbourne, hosted by Hawthorn in Launceston this week. Hawks should win this pretty convincingly, but it is down in Tassie. North, regardless of whether it's Launceston or Hobart, are good in Tassie. North have looked a lot better recently. Their midfield again, they've stepped up all around the ground. Granted, they couldn't really win that fourth quarter, but they still went out that game against Carlton. Hawks, they look decent. Their forward line has started to kind of gel again. Jack Ginnivan has stepped up after the past couple of weeks as well, which is good. Nick Watson. He's
Yeah.
currently not playing, I don't think, but he might come back in for this. I think the
You think
the
UTAS
Sherry
might be a
battle.
stadium that, yeah, UTAS might be a stadium where Nick Watson can get into it because it's like, yeah, because wind's sometimes a bit of a factor, especially this game playing in the afternoon. It's like, yeah, it might be a bit of territory. You might find a dunk kick that you can pick up, try and play off. So I think he'll probably be back in.
Yeah, this might be one of those games where you just have to play a little bit more ground level.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like it's not exactly to North strength weaknesses. I think, as I said, if their midfield holds up, again, we've said that the Hawks are, just a okay-ish inside midfielder. They definitely prefer the outside run. So it's really like if there is any sort of win advantage, can like North defend well enough? And that's not just obviously back six, that's transition as well.
Yeah.
And then obviously the big one is North just going to be able to win the ball enough? And unfortunately, these heavy win games normally rely on transition. It becomes more of a factor because obviously the easier it's easier to win off your halfback. It's easier to send the ball forward, so you need to be disciplined. As long as you keep control, keep tempo, you should be able to. But if you're just like burning the ball over at halfback, you can just get an avalanche pile on you. So yeah, it's a bit hard. There's a lot of range in this game. A disciplined North could like stay between 20. But if they rest their laurels, like this could be a 60-pointer. But I'd say the most likely outcome is like Hawks by 20 or 25.
Yeah, I think Hawks should win this convincingly, but I don't know if it'll be comfortably. Because I think North can match up to them fairly well, especially now that they've found a little bit more footing in terms of performance and like how they want to play in terms of like their development and stuff. I think they match up fairly well. It'll just be whether experience wins out, that sort of thing. I think the Mick Sherry battle, speaking of another ruck battle, will be really, really fun because I've enjoyed watching that battle in the past.
Yeah.
All right, jumping over to Marvel Stadium, where Collingwood yet again host another game there. I'm surprised, to be honest, but they're hosting the West Coast Eagles first against 18th, Battle of the Birds, but also an absolute bloodbath.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. It's hard because again, like it's one of those things, and it's like West Coast already had a game earlier in the year where they had like pretty putrid tackle numbers, pretty bad contested possession numbers, but like this is a game that can also, another game where it might appear like Eagles are putting in lower effort and Collingwood are just blitzing away, but it's gonna be. I guess what the Eagles just need to do is, again, some of those minor wins from the middle. Again, it's not like Collingwood are like a grade ball winning team necessarily from the center. It's more what they do with it. So try and at least win territory, even if it's not that effective. And just score when it's in there. Defense wise, I mean, they might match up okay at times. It's just, the clinicalness. Don't let there be a lot of space. And just keep running two ways, which is again something where the Eagles have suffered a lot. They're good at offensively running, not so much at defensively running.
Yeah.
And if they do that,
I don't
just gonna walk all
know.
over them.
I don't know how much you can really get out of coaching this game. I think you just have to try and contend, try and put pressure where possible on key players, which is basically all of them for Collingwood.
So
it's
like I don't know.
I don't
do something less weird, like put Gibney on Dacos because as I said, Collingwood aren't that tall. You probably don't need, depending on how confident on your lineup. You might put, depending on who they play. He was the one that played and got all those disposals, and Harry Edwards. I forgot his name.
I can't remember.
Well, there's Brock as well, but whoever you want to play out of those three. So
yeah,
you can be flexible, but I don't know if it's going to do.
The one thing I don't want to see out of this game is I don't want them to look deflated. The Eagles, Like,
Yeah,
I want them to be
exactly.
able, I want them to at least try to contend to the very end, to prove that despite the fact that you are likely going to get beaten and probably beaten by
Mm,
100 points, let's be honest, that
yeah,
you're still going to try and turn this into a worthwhile learning experience. Because, like, granted,
I think.
huge margin games, you
Yeah,
can't really learn too much from them, to be honest. But if you can at
I think
least,
that's like the most disappointing thing of the Eagles is that their senior players are the ones that are giving up early.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like the kids are obviously playing for next match. Not always execution great, but it's like your Kellys, your Duggans. Um, yeah, as I said, it's just been a bit. I
and
mean, yeah, we'll
we
see.
just want to do this more for personal development rather than
Yeah, exactly.
expecting the whole team to kind of lift at once. Like, because you can use the footage
Yeah,
of this, like on your one-on-ones on things like that, to
yeah,
really review and learn about them. But like as a whole team thing, you're likely expecting
mm,
it to be a bloodbath by Collingwood. Just try and
yeah.
get what you can out of it, and then move on to next week.
And it's only one win for the season, so it's like you want to be at least putting in some effort every game just to pinch anything
Yeah,
whenever it comes up. So it could be against Collingwood. We all doubt it, but I mean, you have to
stranger things
try.
have happened.
Yeah.
And if someone is dumb enough to gamble responsibly, but to put a bet on this game where they're paying
Good.
$12.50, wing it.
I mean, they're going to lose whatever money they put in. Like, I'll
Yeah,
almost
it's
guarantee it.
that's
But
the reality of it. All right, jumping
yeah.
over to our Sunday games and over at the MCG. I should probably be at this game. It's Richmond hosting the Crows.
Hey.
I am again expecting Adelaide to beat us pretty convincingly.
Mm.
Again, they look really really good. Again, they have some minor facets I could still definitely work on the Crows. For
Yeah.
us, I just want to see again some more development. Just try your hardest.
Yeah.
Maybe come out with a
Exactly.
couple of surprises, make it close. Um, but yeah,
And I think, in like we've said often, like to some of these young teams, like, oh, go more offensively based, all that sort of thing. I think Richmond's the opposite this game. I think if they can like shut down, and it's not all just the Tolkien forwards. I think if they can keep 1-0 and maybe like either a Keys or like a Rankin to 0 goals, that would be a huge win. You know, just make some sort of stand, try and limit. Maybe you get a few opportunities from the middle where Adelaide are just, decent as a, contender
mm.
for the midfield. So,
I think this is the
yeah,
first.
as I said.
I think it's the first game we've played the Crows this year, and the last time we played the Crows
Yeah.
was at Adelaide Oval and we
Yeah.
beat them.
Yeah.
So it
Who knows? Maybe it's the
could be
bidding.
another surprising story there, but I'm not expecting
We
it
said
with
that
how
about
the.
Sydney this year, and that was like their worst game. So
Yeah, I know. That one's kind
that's
of
the
funny
flip
though.
side.
Um,
Yeah,
but
true.
yeah, with this one, I'm expecting the Crows to be a lot less forgiving in terms of the fight back in this one.
Yeah, exactly. So, as I said, so obviously the Crows will be disappointed that they let the game against Hawthorn away, recovered over the bye, and they should come out firing. But I think there's just like some restriction to be had. Like, as I said, just steady the ship a little bit for
Hmm.
Richmond. That's all we want.
I just want to see strong contention from our younger players. Hopefully, it's some better conversion up forward, and then we'll
Yeah,
see how we go from there. It might potentially be a Lafau bring back. I'm praying. I would love to
I
see
hope so.
Lafau back. He's looked
Love
really
to
good in
see
the
him.
VFL since he's come back from injury. So hopefully, but as long as we can contend, preferably make it somewhat close. I'll be happy with that.
Yeah,
And then,
absolutely.
all right, jumping over to our last game of the round, over in the West at Optus Stadium,
Mm.
Fremantle hosts St Kilda.
It's 5 in a row for Fremantle. They look okay-ish. This is like the peak moment that they love to lose randomly
It
against the
really
Saints. And
is.
this is the scene that the Saints love to randomly win against.
This is
It's
literally,
like something that's
literally
in
the
there.
game of all games.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, I almost expect like St Kilda's probably like they're a better chance than the odds, just from their weird hoodoo magic that they sort of have. But in terms of like actual analysis, yeah, again, if they can do what they did to Collingwood, keep that sort of solid shape in the midfield, not let, Fremantle run all over them by getting it to the outside is easy. Because we've seen, Sarong and Brayshaw, they've had good seasons, but they can be a bit, not dump heavy, but you know what I mean, like less impactful.
Yeah.
If you just don't let the outlets off, if you force them to make a decision. Especially Sarong, if you force Sarong to make a quick decision, his scoring involvements drop fairly quickly. Where if he gets some time, he gets really involved. So that's where St Kilda need to match up. Their defense is probably strong enough to, they'll keep one of Amos or Tracy quiet. As I said, I imagine Wilkie would probably actually run with Tracy. That's sort of like the role he sorts of, he likes to roam around the ground.
Well, considering
a bit,
Tracy loves to have big leads, I would assume that's what Wilkie will have to do, is to just run with him, play against him. I'm expecting Windhager to probably have another tagging role, likely on Sarong, but might go to Brayshaw.
Sarong,
but it's only this could genuinely be the coin flip game. And by the coin flip game, I mean St Kilda could genuinely just take the win out from under the Dockers.
Exactly. And it's about attacking the methodology because, as we said, I still don't think that forward half connection's quite right for Freo. So that's where it begins. They've been bailed out by a very strong month of midfield performance. But yeah, as I said, they haven't looked that impressive. But back off, as I said, they've got to be opportunistic because Fremantle's defense are fairly solid. So that's where I think some of the luck area is going to come with it. Jack Higgins has been a bit quiet this last month. Obviously, I know, maybe he plays midfield, maybe he plays forward, but, Philippi, if he's not playing, just doesn't do anything. So, it means that Sharma might have to kick a goal, or someone like Wood pops up. But I think this is a game where Wood's probably less likely to have an impact.
Considering Freo's defense has actually, come together a little bit better in the past couple of weeks. I don't think Wood's going to have as much of an impact as he would like. I'd like to see Mitch Owens have a much better game as he did last week. He was all right last week against Collingwood, but I want to see him kind of step up a little bit more. Otherwise, I think Freo should probably have this. But again, this could be the game that they randomly drop.
Also, I know this is a bit of a weird one, but I reckon putting a bit of attention into which one's Clark? Jordan Clark. Because the more I think about it, it's all these players, they've got the tools, they're a bit fast, but if they can bring it to ground level where St Kilda are more dangerous. You know what I mean? I think Clark is the one that's more likely to nullify that danger. Because he has been a very good defensive small forward. So, maybe that's something where they might put a bit of a, an unconventional matchup there. So, it seems like something Ross would pull anyway.
Oh, yeah. He comes up with some weird ideas and somehow they work.
Yeah.
That's why he's Ross the
boss. He loves a good shutdown. Yeah.
But just for verbal note, the Brisbane Lions, Geelong, Essendon, and the GWS Giants all have the bye for this week. All right, just to wrap up, you a couple of weeks ago prepared a mid-season All-Australian list. Shall we have a quick run through it?
Awesome, yeah. You've got the doc?
I do indeed.
Good.
So, you want to bring us through the introductions of it all?
Yeah, well, as you can tell from the title, Midway AA, slightly less effort than we put in our podcast titles every week. But just a bit of a caveat. I made this 2 weeks ago before. Oh, sorry. It's, So the last 2 rounds haven't influenced this list. I don't think it changes all that much, but I just thought I'd mention that. And the way I like to do AAs is I want to make a team that's still balanced positionally. You could put this team out and it probably just wouldn't fall apart. And that does mean I've omitted some players because I just don't think they would have fitted the team or their skills were already represented. And also, this is just my opinion, man.
Amen.
And, as I said, so yeah, I think we can get started on the backs. I think that's all that needs to be said. And I have gone with Sam Taylor and Wilkie. I just think, if you've got two shutdowns, you've got one that's one of the best one-on-one defender shutdowns and one of the best off the player interceptor that can still play one-on-one. You just can't pick any other two. Like, I just think they're locks for All Australian at this point. It would take a massive defensive player. There's not too many that comes to mind. Sam Collins is maybe it, but I don't even think he's had quite as good of a season as he had last year. So
yeah, I agree with that.
And the fringes, but yeah. And, maybe a bit controversial, although he has had a really good couple of weeks, which makes me feel a bit more justified. But Nick Blakey. And this is a bit more where I'm going towards team balance. Because in my mind, his improved one-on-one defensively. I still maintain he's actually had a better year than he did last year when he made All-Australian. But the thing for me is just he is that player that, line breaking off halfback, especially deep, especially for the halfback that I've picked, which is more about ball distribution. I think Nick Blakey just fits perfectly back there. So that's sort of why I went with him. Plus, I still think he's All-Australian standard. Some disagree. I do not listen to those some people. But in terms of the halfbackers, a few obvious picks in Bailey Dale and Lockie Ash. And then a sort of left of field pick in Carl Amon. Amon because I think he's like literally one of the best or cleanest, I should say, ball users and provides a bit of dash. I think Lockie Ash is one of the most offensive ball users. And then Bailey Dale, you know what I mean? It's like he's literally just racking up disposals and still being like defensively accountable.
He's had honestly a really, really, really good season.
Yeah, it's like Dan Houston's best year, but instead of like, more clinical disposal, he's like a bulk disposal user.
Yeah.
Again, the Bulldogs have improved a lot of halfback this last 2 years, and a lot can be said to the improvement of Bailey Dale.
Absolutely. All right, jumping over to your mids.
Yeah. And yes, like most of the things, I've only technically picked one outside midfielder. So this is obviously the centre line, which is Hugh McCluggage, not technically a winger, but you'll see through my team thing that there's a reason why I put him there. Ed Richards and Steele Sidebottom. Steele Sidebottom, probably the closest thing to a pure winger on here. And that's like who I would center this team around. He's really good at getting through the game offensively and defensively on the wing. He's so even in his performance. And again, I've said Collingwood are probably the best transition team, and Steele Sidebottom's year has probably gone under the radar to why that is. So, as I said, to me, I would like pick him as like the pure winger. McCluggage, as I said, he's more of an inside midfielder that still plays outside. And a bit the same with Ed Richards. So that's why I sort of put them in the centre line. But obviously, McCluggage and Richards, we've gone off at length.
We have. Why. They've had incredible
not much
seasons.
To say there. And yeah, boringly, I'm going with Max Gawn again. I still just think, in terms of pure everything, he does everything. He defends fairly well when he needs to go back, good at clearances, and he's the only part of the Melbourne midfield that's being consistent week in, week out. So put him in there. Noah Anderson, again, confirmation bias proves this by last match, but probably one of the best offensively based midfielders in the competition at the moment.
Yeah, I agree.
And then Andrew Brayshaw, a bit more balanced. Again, I try to get a bit of composition in this midfield. But yeah, can put in defensive efforts. Fairly consistent. Did drop off a bit, but it sort of lifted again. I was a bit worried that this one will make me look a bit silly, but yeah, it's like he was a bit on the cusp when I wrote it, but I'm a bit more confident in that pick now.
Yeah,
we'll go through who
I think could. The stretch of 5 games has really, really helped to kind of lift his generalized opinion for people, but also when he lifts, like when that entire Freo midfield lifts, like Freo are a much better side, and a lot of that goes to Brayshaw. His credit.
Yeah, and it's like, well, what about Sarong? He gets more like, similar things. And like, yeah, he's a hard nut, but he just doesn't have that distribution that Brayshaw has.
Yeah,
That's why I like go with him a bit more.
I agree.
All right. Going with the forwards, and probably my weakest on-field pick, I'm putting Nick Martin. Again, this is more structure, because like in my mind, and this is like mixed between Nick Martin and Carl Amon.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two players I'm seeing as like a wing sort of combined wing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
So
like
they're the ones that kind of rotate
Nick Martin
around.
will do. Yeah, exactly. And Nick Martin's a very forward half players. Hasn't had the best 2 weeks. Essendon's obviously struggling a bit. But I still think some of his forward half distribution, I think, is why Essendon score a bit better than their limited supply suggests.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they're struggling, I still think Nick Martin's very important, and he's having a very not understated thing, but I still think it's worthy of All Australian level. Jeremy Cameron,
You don't have to say much about
obviously
Cameron. He's had a
leading
wonderful
the
season up
Coleman,
forward.
distributing. Yeah. Jack Higgins, again, probably fallen off over the last couple of weeks. But his creativity has kept St Kilda in a lot of early matches, and he keeps on peppering away. He's one of the more creative ones, except for obviously someone in this full forward line, and that is, of course, Jamie Elliott. Honestly, one of the best small forward seasons we've seen for someone of his age. I can't remember the last time a 32-year-old small forward has had that good a season.
Yeah, I got nothing in my head at the moment. Maybe. Oh no, he was more of a midfielder. Never mind. Yeah, I think Elliott's like kind of had like one of the more prominent veteran talent small forward seasons.
Yeah, and even like Toby Green, it's like, well, you might say him, but like he's definitely a lot more involved in the midfield. Where Elliott is just like, you know what I mean? Is on that island in there. So yeah, so again, Jesse Hergen, again, need I say more? Sort of, he's had more games. Like I don't think his games have been consistent, as consistent as other players for this spot, but he always provides a bit.
He does.
And then Ben Long, again, not a great week last week, but still one of the best versatile forward players. He's tall enough, you have to bring attention to him. He's speedy enough, to play up.
Mm-hmm.
He can even push to the wing if you need it to be. And for that versatility, I think he earns a spot there.
Yeah, plus he's one of those smaller players that plays tall. Like, he basically plays as a second tall forward alongside Ben King.
Well, as I said, you either interpret him as like one of the best tallest small forwards or the smallest tall forward. So, and either way, it's hard for a defender to decide, hard for a coach to decide exactly which sort of defender you want to put on him.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, now going to the interchange. Paul Curtis, again, first half of the season, it's been amazing. Generally takes the most of his opportunities, especially considering how little North still get the ball down there. So pretty much, again, maybe a bit more of the tentative player, but I still think is worth fitting into the side. Bailey Smith, a lot of people starting him. I think his ball use, again, is one of those things where I think it's both both overrated and underrated. Like, I don't think it's as big a problem as some people say, to put him out of the All Australian. But I do think in my list, that's why I might put McCluggage and Steele Sidebottom. I mean, just ahead.
I mean, look, personally, I'd probably put a Max Holmes here rather than a Bailey Smith. But Bailey Smith is more of the running role rather than.
But the way that Geelong play, they work around the dump kick.
Yeah,
so that's why I think and plus Max Holmes is still meters gained. So again, it really depends. I guess maybe the argument is maybe put him on the interchange and sub him off with someone like Amon. You know what I mean? But yeah, as I said. But Liberatore, which I'm pretty sure I've actually spelled wrong.
You have indeed spelled it wrong, but that's okay. Go on.
I've just put Liver, and then I was like, I better put his full name, so I just put Torre on.
It's Libra.
Yeah, I know it's Libra, but I think I had it as Liver initially. I mean, contested possession, in terms of the midfielders I selected, you probably want a bit of a bigger body in case they're getting beaten out. So, he just fits the bill perfectly. Probably Matt Rowell is, the next one down the rank.
Yeah.
And then to finishing it off, again, I'm not the sort of person that would play two ruckman in a normal side. So I think for the All Australian, I'm ledging towards the best. What do you call it? Best forward ruck.
Yeah.
And that's Luke Jackson.
Yeah, I agree. Jackson's versatility has been like really good this season, and the fact that he doesn't necessarily have to play a second.
He can take the main ruck. Yeah, exactly. He can take the main ruck duties. He can play forward very potently. Again, like maybe if Riley Thilthorpe had a few more really big games, if he was in the main team, I could consider dropping Jackson. But even without the versatility, he's just had a really good season.
Yeah,
I don't think that's actually been mentioned often enough. Like, this is probably one of the, like, honestly, like, for how much of a dog's breakfast it is, like, with Darcy going in and out of the side, that's Sean Darcy, obviously, for Fremantle, how well Jackson's just been able to handle things. Like, you would expect, like, it's like, if he had a bad season, you're just like, oh, yeah, Darcy's going in and out of the side. There's no consistency.
Yeah.
But he's just been able to adapt.
And I think having his captain, Alex Pearce, back on the side as well has really, really helped him, because I know they work really closely together. Yeah. And they're able to, like, I think having each other on field elevates both of them because of just how strong they work together.
Yeah. Anyway, so they're sort of the ones that are in the mix, and there's a few big omissions, probably starting with one, but you and I both agree. Neil Wangani Malira.
Isaiah.
I think you got to decide between Nasiah, sorry. I think that's where you got to decide between Bailey Dow and Wangani Malira. I think Malira's more of like your meters gain generator, where Bailey Dow's like your bulk distribution.
I agree.
But at the end of the day, it's like, as I said, you got enough spark in generation there, and Nasiah Wangani Malira, the ball use is probably the one that's, just edging him out. But, this has been very harsh. I think halfback quality is very good. And arguably, even after these 2 weeks, I think maybe he's taken Amon's spot. Again, it was at the time where I sort of put him in over, put Amon over him, and he's had 2 pretty good games since. Jack Sinclair, again, very good season, sort of where St Kilda's needed him. A good option for the interchange if, as I said, you're building a team like I have, and you're like, I want like a bit of an inside midfielder option that can also provide some defensive effort. So, more than worthy of being in the team still, even if you would still probably go Nasiah first. But yeah, Jeremy Howe, again, he's not so much a champion data rated really good player, but he has been so important for Collingwood's backline. He just fills the holes so much. He comes off, he prevents teams from going, okay, we're just going to avoid Darcy Moore. Because if you avoid Darcy Moore, like, Jeremy Howe's going to find those gaps and fill it in. And you know what I mean? And it just, sure, they've got like perfect synergy as well with Billy Frampton, who can just like play lockdown. Not the best lockdown, but good enough for Collingwood's system. But yeah, Jeremy Howe has just like benefited a lot from that. Collins, we've already mentioned before. Clark, I sort of already mentioned when I was talking about Freo. Very good distributor, very great on ground level. And Zorko, Brisbane, again, has been decent off the halfback. Zorko, again, a bit the same as Wangani Malira. Sometimes turns the ball over, but he just generates so much offense that you don't really care. And it's still good enough to be in the mix.
And he's still having a really solid season overall as well. So, can't fault too much.
Yeah. Now for the mids, and this is probably where some of the biggest names I've left out the list are. I would argue, actually, the biggest name is Jordan Dawson for Adelaide. Again, it was still that first half of the year. I think in the first 5 rounds, his ball use wasn't up to scratch, and Adelaide were, just not they were more not suffering because of it, more than you know, more than anything. But then, as I said, in terms of like being a game winner, influential midfielder, he has lifted. So if he continues on, he's on the path to get into the list. It's just, as I said, maybe it's biased, maybe it's not. But like as I said, I still am reminded from the first 5 weeks where it was a bit average. Will Ashcroft, I think, is having a good enough season to be considered into the mix. Probably not quite there yet, but good enough to think, squad level, because, Brisbane midfield has been good, but it's been different players, and Will Ashcroft is one of them. Again, if you wanted to go pure wingers, Jasper Fletcher, you know what I mean? Like, if you're like being solid, but no one puts real wingers, not even people that complain there's not enough wingers in the All Australian. Like, they'll do that and put Bailey Smith on the wing.
Yeah,
I'm calling you out there.
That's the reality of it, sadly.
Making your own team. It's just what happens. Nick Dacos, obviously still a gun player. Don't think that he's playing a bad season at all. Just in the way that you tend to rate an All-Australian team, I think statistically it's just suffered a bit because it's been taxed so heavily. But that being said, I would still like pick him if I was like drafting a team from scratch. It's just not quite an All-Australian year.
Yeah.
But as for Port, also probably a bit stiff. He would be like that perfect half forward thing. I don't think you would put him in Nick Martin's role though. Like, is like one of the players that you would just like shove in that half forward line, and I don't think that's very fair. And as I said, I just think that there's been better inside midfielders. As I said, I've been strict on my inside midfielders, and that's why Butters has missed out.
Well, I mean, not to also mention that Port are like severely underperforming to where they should be. And like Butters is...
Oh, that's nothing to do with Butters.
I don't know. I think that Butters, granted, he was out with injury for a while, but like he has missed a couple of, like, there's been a couple of moments where he like dropped off, not as a whole game, but in the middle of a game, he's kind of just, his output suddenly dropped and then suddenly spikes back up. There's brief moments of that.
I disagree. I would say that's more like a player like Connor Rosie, which people are still.
Oh, actually, I might be
putting in that conversation.
You're probably right.
Yeah,
they're too alike.
I mean, you're right. He has missed a few games, which doesn't help. But yeah, honestly, I don't think I would even come close to like have any criticisms for Zach Butters when I compare him to the other players of Port's team.
True.
Going to the forward line. Oh wait, sorry, no. Christian Cherry.
You're gonna miss out on my goat. Excuse me.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, as I said, it's a very two-way ruck contest.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of decent rucks, but in terms of All Australian, go on a Cherry. Again, Cherry, if you wanted to pick a ruckman just for purely tap and inside midfielder work, I think you'll go that. But I think around the ground, Gawns just wins.
Yeah,
and I rate that. So, yeah. Again, depends what you want. Both very good years.
Agreed.
Again, like, don't complain about picking one All-Australian ruckman. Complain that there's not more ruck awards.
I agree.
Yeah.
Before you continue on, like we have Mark of the Year and Goal of the Year, we need the best ruck tap of the year, surely.
Yeah, exactly. Palm of the Year, exactly.
Like the Golden Fist,
anyway.
Except for rucks.
Yeah. In the mix of the forward line, Cozzy Pickett, again, a tiny bit off and on, but in terms of like that plug and play, midfielder, maybe like an Isaac Rankin, I think Pickett's been like one of the best of them. Very versatile, still a pure forward, and still kicking a reasonable amount of goals in that pretty garbage Melbourne forward line. Max King for the Suns. Need I say more? The only downside, obviously, if he isn't scoring goals directly, is not doing much. Which, 2 weeks ago was more reasonable when he was like closer to the Coleman. Struggled a bit, but it'll only take one game for him to get back up there.
Yeah.
Riley Philthorpe, honestly, really good for a pinch ruckman too. I think he does more than just score goals. So even though he's not in there in that mix, I still think it's more worth, but I wouldn't be putting him over a Hogan or a Cameron in the side. That's just
yeah, I agree
behind
with
the
that.
ask. Ben Keys, though, I think someone not often talked about for All Australian contention, but I think it's like legitimately he's in the mix there. Very good opportunist, high strike rate. He gets the cheap goals, but he's so good at finding them, and that's dangerous. It's like. I think if you're going to like criticize him for that, you could criticize Curtis for the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. You can
But
criticize Higgins for
obviously,
a lot of similar stuff as well.
yeah, exactly. Well, Higgins creates a few more. Like he'll do some bullcrap.
That's just the
thing
St Kilda
as
thing, to be
well.
extremely creative.
Yeah. But yeah, as I said, I think he's been very consistent. And again, if Curtis did drop off, he would actually be the player I'll be like shoving in there. And Jack Gunston, I think he's had a very solid year. And I was wanting to go again more goal kicking, maybe for like a backup for Ben Long if you weren't too keen on him. So Gunston was sort of the one I would put in the mix. These players are just like players who, if you like didn't like my selection, I would think like they're the next best to go to.
Yeah.
Still plenty of good players that I haven't mentioned. But if you don't like that, I don't care. Because it's a Midway All Australian, and it doesn't actually mean anything until we get to the actual All Australian.
Correct.
Like everyone in my players could get injured this coming round.
Correct.
I hope it doesn't happen, but
theoretically. Nothing. But with that all said and done, it does bring us to the end of episode 64. Thank you all so much for coming to hang out, coming to listen, coming to chat, coming to watch, coming to like and subscribe. This week could be extremely interesting. It could be extremely boring. Who knows? That's the upsides and the downsides of the bye rounds, honestly, because there's less games. It means there's less entertainment. But we somehow managed to fit 2 and a bit hours usually out of a bye round, so we made it work.
Yeah. And any angry comments about Thursday night's game, you can direct on my socials. I don't check them out often, but we love engagement if we can get it, so please do.
We do. I'm streaming as per usual. You can find me all at my links. In fact, I might be live tonight after we finish recording this and I finish editing, so who knows? Otherwise, go check out our podcast socials. Our weekly socials update will always go there. Might try and fit in some little extra stuff, depending on if any important news come out, and we don't get time to cover it in next week's podcast, so we'll see. Otherwise, I will be boots on ground, hopefully, for the Sunday game with Richmond and the Crows. And until then, thank you all so much once again, and we'll see you all next week for episode 65. So until then, take care.